hour. We have so much going on in the next hour that I want to get right to it. Our Christina Van Zelst is covering a story that a lot of people have been closely watching now for years. We are talking about the future of the Element Lounge on Water Street. So as we've been reporting now for quite some time, Element Lounge has sort of been, I don't want to say surrounded by, but they've been kind of in the middle of violence on Water Street. And so now the Milwaukee Licenses Committee and the Milwaukee Police Department are both recommending to Milwaukee City leaders, the Common Council, that they have their license revoked. And our Christina Van Zelst has been following the story super closely. I think, hey, Delaney, do we have Christina? Is she ready to go for us? Amazing. Okay, well, let's pull her up here. We have our wonderfully talented reporter, Christina. She's going to take it from here and tell us about the new developments in this story today. Christina, as our viewers and listeners know, this is really a story that's been going back years.
Yeah, it is, and that's one of the reasons the fight isn't over, according to the attorney representing Element Lounge. We just wrapped up an interview with him about an hour ago. To catch you up to speed, the Common Council was meeting today, and they did vote to officially revoke the license here at Element Lounge, which means the city is saying it needs to shut down. That vote was 11-4 this morning after some back and forth. Common Council members were debating doing a 30, 60-day suspension, and ultimately it came down to the city leaders voting to, yes, revoke Element Lounge's license. However, the reason I said the fight isn't over is because we just talked with the attorney who represents Element Lounge, and he says they are planning to take this to court, and they're hoping to get a restraining order with the city so that they can remain open until this is taken to court, and then there will be a more detailed investigation. And the reason they're taking this to court, they said that the owner just took over here in June, and they had plans to turn this into a sports bar, and they were hoping to remove things that people were saying was causing issues like the violence we've seen here on Water Street. So in their license renewal application, they were talking about, they put in there to remove dancing, to remove disc jockeys, and they were asking for pool tables to turn this into a sports bar. That was already in the works, and the attorney for Element Lounge says that that was their plan to make things safer, and that was the new owner's vision for here. So they are planning to take this to court to hopefully get it looked at more closely and let a judge ultimately decide what the future is here at Element Lounge. Nicola, this of course comes after this summer where there were 2 people who were shot and killed outside here in a drive-by shooting. And that's another reason some people say this is misplaced anger or misplaced, they just felt like it was misplaced because this happened outside of the establishment. And one of the questions was, what do you do to prevent a drive-by? Misplaced blame, that's the word I was looking for. So we'll see what happens, but as of this morning, Common Council did officially vote to revoke its license. Next, Element Lounge says they are taking this to court to let a judge ultimately make that final decision.
Yeah, Christina, the whole situation is certainly understandable, White, because you know, you almost feel for this owner because it almost seems like he sort of adopted a problem that's been going back years. Now, I have to wonder, is there any way for, I don't know, for the, and this might be something that's in your reporting later on today, but like, is there a way for the city to set guidelines saying, hey, you know, you've got 6 months to turn this into a sports bar?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things they talked about in their meeting this morning, was doing that suspension to give them maybe an opportunity to come back to the table with something like that. But at this point, no, they have officially voted to revoke the license completely, forcing it to shut down. But you talk about the owner and his vision for what he was hoping to do here, turn it into a sports bar. The attorney says that they had previous contracts to fulfill from the previous owner. That's why they were still doing these promoted events, because they had those contracts to fulfill, but now those are done. So they were really hoping to turn a corner here and make things different here on Water Street. But of course, now with the revocation approved, they're facing that hurdle and will have to take this to court if they do want to reopen their doors, if a judge says yes to that. So they're typically open on Friday and Saturdays, so it looks empty now. It's because it's usually closed during the week.
Sure.
But the attorney we talked to said he's hoping that they'll get this into a court this week and be able to be open on Friday. So we'll have to stay on top of this and see what happens with that. But yeah, no, Common Council officially voted to revoke its license 11-4 this morning.
Yeah, and you have to figure too, Christina, like I'm just thinking about this from the perspective of the owner. For them, it's like they're still probably paying rent on that place because I don't think that they own that building. So if they can't stay open, then how do they make, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do they make money? How do they pay the rent?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know that part of the complication of all of this, but I can tell, we heard from the attorney of the owner that he is frustrated because he had a vision, he had a plan to really combat some of the issues that city leaders and people who live here say were the problem, and that was dancing, the promoted events, disc jockeys, that kind of thing, and now this. So, and again, he just took over here in June. So not a lot of time to turn things around, but frustration, I think, is the best word that you can describe from what we hear from the attorney, how the owner is handling this and just feeling based on kind of the challenges he's faced since taking over.
Yeah, Christina, certainly kind of understandable sentiments on both sides of the issue. Thank you so much for working so hard on this to make sure that both sides are accurately represented. What time can our viewers expect your reports tonight?
Yeah, we'll have this on at 5 o'clock and 6 tonight, and also we'll take you back. You mentioned both sides. I think one thing forgot to mention here is just why people wanted this shut down in the first place. We reported a month ago about how residents in the area are moving out. We had landlords saying people are breaking their leases because of the noise and just the violence that they've seen on Water Street, and we'll make sure to include all of that in our reports later tonight as well. But that's the other side of this story.
Many layers to this. And Christina, you do such a great job as always of getting them all covered. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I can't wait to see your reports tonight at 5 and 6. Thank you so much. I'll let you get back to doing your reporting today.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Nicola.
All right, thank you so much, Christina. She always does such a great job. So yeah, as you heard there's a lot of layers to this story. There's a lot of different kind of facets to explore here. Certainly, you know, kind of valid, understandable situations from regardless of what viewpoint or what perspective you're coming from here. So I will look forward to Christina reports tonight. And as always, if you can't tune in with us over the air, her reports will be available on Fox Local and on FOX6Now.com. Okay, so now that we've checked in with some of our local news for the day, I really want to kind of get to some national stuff that's going on. So I'm going to send us straight to the White House, where White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt is fielding questions from reporters. When the last time I listened to her, she was addressing the government shutdown. So, okay, let's take Karoline Leavitt now. She is speaking right now inside of the White House press room.
And I think it's been very clear to everyone in this room and to everyone across the country that the Democrats are playing partisan politics with our United States federal government. And all Republicans have wanted to do for the last 35 days is reopen the government. That has been the president's position since day one. It is his position today on day 35. And all we need are 5 common sense Democrats with have a little bit of courage and come to the table and vote with Republicans. I saw Senator John Fetterman on television last night saying that he hopes more folks in his party will step up. And we certainly agree with him on that point. Sure.
Caroline, the president posted on Truth Social that the voting underway in California is, quote, rigged. What evidence does he have of that, and what does it mean that mail-in ballots in that state are under legal and criminal review? By whom and why? And also, in this vein, does the White House still plan to issue an executive order banning mail-in voting, and what legal authority do you have to do that?
The White House is working on an executive order to strengthen our elections in this country and to ensure that there cannot be blatant fraud, as we've seen in California with their universal mail-in voting system. It's absolutely true that there's fraud in California's elections. It's just a fact. It is just a fact. They have a universal mail-in voting system, which we know is ripe for fraud. And if you want to deny that, I'm happy to provide you all of the evidence for it. I'd be glad to send that to you after this briefing.
Rigged.
Fraudulent ballots that are being mailed in the names of other people, in the names of illegal aliens who shouldn't be voting in American elections. There's countless examples, and we'd be happy to provide them. As for executive action the White House is taking, yes, we are looking into that. And like any executive order, of course, any executive order the president signs is within his full executive authority and within the confines of the law. Stephen.
Thank you, Caroline. I've got two questions I'd like to ask you about New York, but first I'd like to ask you about breaking news from the Attorney General. She revealed just about an hour ago that the Biden Justice Department seized President Trump's official first-term phone and subpoenaed his private phone records. Do you have a reaction to that? And also, do we know if they actually got those private call records?
I saw the Attorney General's post on that. For additional questions, I would refer you to the Department of Justice, but I think this is just further evidence of the egregious overreach and weaponization of government that took place under the previous White House against then former President and now President Donald J. Trump. It was a clear effort by the Biden White House and the Biden DOJ to go after the president, and this is just further evidence of that.
On New York, we've seen the president's messages that he's put out, but could you describe how he's feeling as a New Yorker watching this election?
Well, the president is a New Yorker and he loves New York. It is his home. He talks about that all of the time, and he's made his thoughts on this election quite clear, I think, himself. In the back, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Over the weekend, there were reports.
I was going to you in the green, but go ahead and then you can have your question.
Thank you. Over the weekend, there were reports that President Trump was due to host President of Syria, Ahmad al-Sharia, on Monday. Do you have any preview for that meeting? Is he expected to invite him to join the U.S.-led anti-ISIS coalition?
I can confirm that that meeting will be taking place here at the White House on Monday, and this is part of the president's efforts in diplomacy to meet with anyone around the world in the pursuit of peace. And as you know, when the president was in the Middle East, he made the historic decision to lift sanctions on Syria to give them a real chance at peace. And I think the administration, we've seen good progress on that front under their new leadership. And so he will be here at the White House on Monday, and I'll let the president speak further on it on Monday. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. I was just curious, you had mentioned there that President Trump, as we know, has been speaking with Republican leaders in Congress about reopening the government. Is he involved in any other negotiations, and is he prepared to sign something if a deal does come out by the end of this week? On top of that, with SNAP benefits, does he have any authorities or considering any authority there to release more funds to help people who are desperately needing these benefits?
So look, I think I've already answered the question on SNAP. We're complying with the court's order, and we're getting that partial payment out the door as much as we can and as quickly as we can, but it's going to take some time because, again, this is a prorated payment that we're tapping into a contingency fund for. The best way to get those payments out the door is for Democrats to reopen the government. But yes, the president is in constant communication with his friends on Capitol Hill. They know, they call, he answers, he picks up the phone. He's a very transparent president in that way. And as soon as the Democrats pass the clean continuing resolution, President Trump will be here to sign it. Michael.
Thank you, Caroline. President Trump has threatened to go into Nigeria guns a-blazing if Nigeria's government does not stop the killing of Christians in that country. Has the White House heard back from Nigeria's government on this threat?
As the president stated, Michael, if the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the United States will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria and may take action to wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities, especially against innocent women and children. I don't have any further announcements on that for you today, but I can assure you the President of the United States is watching this situation unfold very closely, as is our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
Caroline, President Trump has endorsed Andrew Cuomo in New York City's mayoral race. He has not by name endorsed Winsome Sears in Virginia's gubernatorial race. Why is that?
Look, as you know from this podium, I'm quite limited in what I can say with regards to ongoing political elections. I think the president has spoken for himself and what he wants to see take place in these elections today. Lalit.
Thank you. I would like to ask you about India-US relationship. What is President's thoughts on the future of India-US relationship?
I'm sorry, Lalit, can you repeat that?
What is President's thoughts on future of India-US relationship?
I think he feels very positive and strongly about it. As you know, he recently, a few weeks back, spoke to Prime Minister directly when he celebrated in the Oval Office Diwali with many high-ranking Indian American officials here at the White House. We have a great U.S. ambassador to India in Mr. Sergio Gore, who will represent our country very well. And the president and his trade team continue to be in very serious discussions with India with respect to that topic. So I know the president has great respect for Prime Minister Modi, and they speak pretty frequently. Thank you.
Hi, yes. The air traffic controller crisis ongoing. Secretary Duffy said he will now start to cancel and ground flights next week to maintain safety. Should people fly next week given this new information? And is the administration encouraging people to stop flying altogether and look at alternative transportation modes?
The administration is encouraging Democrats to reopen the federal government so this chaos and disruption to our air traffic control system in the United States of America stops. It is ridiculous that we have even gotten to this place and that the Democrats have continued to shut down the government with 35 days, our air traffic controllers continuing to work unpaid, every single major airline in our country coming out and begging the Democrats to please reopen the government. And you had a Democrat staffer who was quoted, I believe in Politico a few weeks back, saying, short of planes falling out of the sky, we are not going to reopen the government. That is a reckless and dangerous statement from someone who didn't want to put their name on that statement, but we know it came from the Democrat Party. And I think we're very clear. We want to reopen the government so we can resume travel in the safest and most efficient way possible, especially as we head into the busiest travel season of the month. We have Thanksgiving in a few weeks. And so Americans across the country need to make it very clear to their Democrat representatives that we want this government to be reopened so we can resume safe and efficient travel. Fran.
Caroline, as of last I checked, the president still had not commented on the death of former Vice President Dick Cheney. Is the White House involved in the funeral arrangements in any way? Does the president plan to speak at the funeral? Has he spoken to anyone in the Cheney family today? And does the White House have an opinion on whether or not the former vice president should lie in honor or stay in the Capitol?
I don't believe the White House is involved in that planning, or at least hasn't gotten to it yet. I know the president is aware of the former vice president's passing, and as you saw, flags have been lowered to half staff in accordance with statutory law. Jasmine.
Thank you. Back on the question of the filibuster, how much political capital is President Trump willing to expend to get Republicans to do what he's asking? I mean, will we see him at the Hill? Will he be calling folks over here? What exactly is President Trump planning to do outside of these true socials and maybe some of these private conversations to get Republicans to fall in line?
Look, I think you'll see. I think you'll see the president continue to engage very strongly and consistently with his friends on Capitol Hill. I don't have any meetings to read out for you at this time, but I think you should stay tuned and keep your eyes on Truth Social on this matter. The president's making his position on it quite clear. And again, he is right. Republicans need to play tough. We know that this is what the Democrats will do if they are ever given the keys to power again. And he wants to pass as many good pieces of legislation as we possibly can for our country and for our people. That includes election integrity reforms. It includes additional tax policy. It includes, fixing our immigration system further in ways that only Congress can. And the president fears with a Democrat Party that is so radical and opposes everything he does and everything he says, this is the only option for Republicans to move forward. Karen.
Question. President Trump said to CBS in the 60 Minutes interview that he did not know the Binance founder, which he pardoned. What exactly did he mean for that? I know it caused.
He means he does not know him personally. He means he does not have a personal relationship with this individual. And when it comes to pardons, the White House takes them with the utmost seriousness, and the president understands the responsibility that he has as president to issue clemency and issue pardons to individuals who are seeking that. That's why we have a very thorough review process here that moves with the Department of Justice and the White House counsel's office. There's a whole team of qualified lawyers who look at every single pardon request that ultimately make their way up to the President of the United States. He's the ultimate final decision maker. And he was very clear when he came into office that he was most interested in looking at pardoning individuals who were abused and used by the Biden Department of Justice and were over-prosecuted by a weaponized DOJ. And the individual you're referring to, that was certainly the case. Even the judge in his case said that the sentencing that the Biden administration was asking for was egregious and went too far. And so the president is correcting that wrong, and he has officially ended the Biden administration's war on the cryptocurrency industry, and I think that's the message he sent with this pardon. Karen, yes.
Back on the issue of back pay for furloughed workers, you said that the White House is open to discussing that with Democrats, but what would that discussion even be? There was a law, the president signed it in 2019. What could a discussion look like why is that even open for discussion?
Look, Karen, as I said, Republicans are talking about that with Democrats right now, and I don't want to get in the middle of those sensitive conversations. But as we've complied with the SNAP order, the White House, the administration is always going to comply with the laws. We're always going to comply with the ruling of judges across the country. But the Republicans are discussing this matter with Democrats right now.
Why would there even be a consideration of not paying those workers?
Tom Dempsey with News Nation. Big day in the Supreme Court tomorrow with President Trump's tariff policy facing a legal challenge. What's at stake with that case? And if the Supreme Court rules against the Trump administration, what is Plan B for trade policy?
I'll tell you, the White House is always preparing for Plan B. It would be imprudent of the president's advisors not to prepare for such a situation. With that said, we are 100% confident in the president and his team's legal argument in the merits of the law in this case, and we remain optimistic that the Supreme Court is going to do the right thing. The importance of this case cannot be overstated. The president must have the emergency authority to utilize tariffs. Look at what President Trump has been able to do with the leverage and the power of tariffs. He's been able to sign peace deals all over the world and end global conflicts and literally save lives. He's been able to bring in trillions of dollars of investments into our country. In fact, this year alone, we are going to cut the deficit by $600 billion, namely because of the president's effective use of tariffs. And the president strongly believes that economic security is a matter of national security, and tariffs have a lot to do with that. And this case is not just about President Trump. It's about the use of this emergency authorization for tariffs for future presidents and administrations to come, and we're confident and hopeful that the Supreme Court will do the right thing. Kristen.
Why did President Trump get an MRI during his recent visit to Wall Street?
Look, as President Trump said, he would inquire with the physicians. I'll check back on that. But as the physical itself stated, Kristen, and as you all know, because you were all witness to it, every single day the president is in optimal physical health. This was a follow-up appointment, and we provided a detailed readout of that physical. I'm happy to give it to you again, and I can inquire further.
With all due respect, an MRI is a very specific procedure. It's done on a part of the body looking for something specific, so it's not generally part of any kind of routine checkup. And in addition, President Trump has said that he wants to be transparent. He told us to ask the doctors, which we have and have not heard back. Why don't we have more information on this?
As I said, I'll check back for you. Go ahead.
Karen, can you update us on the mediation efforts this administration is leading in Sudan, trying to achieve a ceasefire there?
Sure, yes. The United States is actively engaged in efforts to bring about a peaceful resolution to the terrible conflict in Sudan. We remain committed to working with our international partners, including Quad members, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, as well as others, to lead a negotiated peace process that addresses both the immediate humanitarian crisis and the longer-term political challenges. I actually spoke with Secretary Rubio about this morning, as of course there's been, kind of an uptick in recent reporting on the matter, and he assured me that the administration is very much engaged. We're in pretty frequent communication with those Arab partners that I just mentioned, and we want to see this conflict come to a peaceful end, just as we have with so many others, but the reality is it's a very complicated situation on the ground right now. Yes.
Hi, yes. Just trying to go back into the subject of Mexico. Is the Trump administration planning to send U.S. troops to Mexico to combat drug cartels, as reported by other outlets?
That's not something I would confirm from this podium if it were happening, so I will not comment on that. Eamon.
Thank you, Caroline. Why did the president decide not to go to the Supreme Court tomorrow? He'd indicated earlier that he might want to go and attend in person.
Yeah.
Now he's saying he's not going to go. Why?
The president did have an interest in attending the Supreme Court hearing tomorrow, as I just expressed how important it is to him, the administration, and the country, this case. But he is traveling to Miami tomorrow, as you all know, to give an economic address with the mayor of Miami and many global business leaders to talk about his historic success with the economy over the past 10 months and talk about sort of where we are headed as a country in terms of our economy. So he'll be traveling tomorrow on the road in Miami. That's why he won't be here, but Secretary Scott Bessent will be in attendance at the hearing tomorrow at the request of the president.
He has said that he doesn't want to export the high-end NVIDIA chips to China, but the Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that there was some question about whether the president would raise this as a possible concession with the Chinese side during his meeting with Xi Jinping. So does the White House consider NVIDIA chip exports to China to be a closed issue right now, or is this an ongoing negotiation between the United States, China, and NVIDIA at this point?
The president has made his position on this very clear, both to the Chinese and also to all of you. He's answered this question directly. As for the most advanced chips, the Blackwell chip, that's not something we're interested in selling to China at this time. Annie?
Does the president think that the results of the Virginia or New Jersey gubernatorial races tomorrow, or statewide races tomorrow, will in any way reflect a voter sentiment towards his administration?
Look, Annie, I'm not at liberty to talk about the election results, and I certainly won't get ahead of them. I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals that may or may not happen tonight. We'll have to watch and see. And I'm sure you'll hear directly from the president tomorrow on that point.
On Snap, just really quickly, is there anything that prompted the president's tweet this morning? Because it did seem quite different from some of his other communications about Snap. It seemed a little bit out of the left field. I'm just wondering if he had a conversation or if there's anything you're aware of that caused him to decide to, at around 11 o'clock, to send out that message.
Look, the president is constantly well read on the news, as you know, and he is very much aware we are in day 35 of a government shutdown in which these SNAP benefits, we're pushing them out the door. USDA put out that guidance to the states this morning. The president was aware of that, and he wants to make it very clear that these benefits are in jeopardy because of the Democrats, and they should just open the government so that we can continue getting these funds out the door in an easier and more efficient way.
There's some new reporting that just dropped a few minutes ago that the Trump administration is negotiating with the makers of Ozempic to sell some weight loss drugs for $149 a month. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. Do you have any more information on that? Can you confirm that?
I think the president has said himself in previous Most Favored Nations announcements that this is something that the administration has been engaged in and looking into. I won't get ahead of the president on any future announcements, but I will echo his strong commitment to bringing down drug prices in this country. And you've heard it directly from Secretary Kennedy and Dr. Marty Makary and his entire Health and Human Services team, how committed the president is to bringing down the cost of drugs, and we're working with pharmaceutical companies to do that every day.
Very quickly, Caroline, on SNAP. I know it's been asked, and I know Leach asked it, but I want to put a fine point on it. You talked about President's post here, and he wrote that SNAP benefits will only be given to radical left Democrats open up the government. I understand your previous answers, but as written, how would that not violate a court order as it's written?
I've now answered this question several times, Gabe. We are complying with the court's order. We are getting the payments out the door as quickly as we can. USDA sent the guidance to the state. The president is referring to future SNAP payments. He does not want to have to keep tapping in to an emergency fund and depleting it. In the case of a catastrophe in this country, he wants to have those funds preserved, as they should be. And he's made it very clear Democrats should reopen the government. I have one final positive note for all of you. I told you I would keep you posted when the White House would resume public tours. Well, I'm pleased to announce the Office of the First Lady has reopened the doors for public tours on Tuesday, December 2nd. There will be an updated route, of course, for guests in light of the ballroom construction that's taking place, but we very much look forward to celebrating the holiday season. And the public and members of Congress and anyone who wants to come visit the First Lady's beautiful decorations is welcome to go to whitehouse.gov/visit to sign up for a tour. Thanks, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, you are listening into the... Okay, sorry, I thought my mic was muted. You were listening into Caroline Leavitt, that is the White House press secretary, speaking live to reporters, gosh, for about an hour there, wide-ranging subject matter, everything from the president's change in plans about appearing before the Supreme Court of the United States tomorrow, as they are going to hear basically whether he has the authority to impose the tariffs that he has imposed on other nations. They also talked about election fraud. That was an issue that came up. Gosh, a lot was covered in that hour. So now let's take a break, since I don't think we've taken one yet in this half hour, and I will see you on the other side of it. We're going to check in with the polls in New York, and we're also going to check in with D.C., where a flight has been grounded in our nation's capital. All right, I'm going to put us to a break right now, and I'll see you.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
From the White House press briefing room, now let's head to the polls in New York, shall we? You're taking a live look here at one of the polling locations that is open today as voters all over the city of New York head to the polls to choose their next mayor. Now, this is a really interesting election. It is decision day for NYC. Will the city end up with a socialist mayor when all is said and done? Yeah, so proud DSA member Zoran Mamdani, who's 34 years old, has maintained his lead as New Yorkers head to the polls Tuesday. This is, of course, to elect the next mayor of New York City, with former New York governor and independent candidate Andrew Cuomo very close behind. And then, of course, we have the GOP nominee Curtis Sliwa as a distant third. So the polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. local time. So it looks like they're hitting a little bit of a lull. I know things were a little busier this morning. Let's take a look here at some of the things that are going on at the polls. Okay, it looks like Mayor Adams hasn't voted yet, which is kind of interesting. People had heard that he was supposed to be at City Hall and would be polling. Will be headed there to a Brooklyn polling center, but that was 3 hours ago. You might recall, I mean, it's notable because he is the current mayor. He was seeking re-election. Then he dropped out and started supporting Cuomo. Oh dear. Okay. Sorry, guys. Oh, okay. Huh. I'm not sure why that beeping just went off, but I can silence it. There's no need for us to listen to that. It's certainly an interesting race, that is for sure. Voters are kind of weighing in on kind of why they're voting for who they're voting for. Let's see here. I want to look up some nuggets for you guys. I'm just curious, like, what they're thinking in terms of turnout. Let's see here. I don't know. I always find those kind of nuggets interesting. Okay. Yeah, okay. More than 1 million New Yorkers are expected to head to the polls today to choose the next mayor. This has been such a wild election cycle. Get some polls for us. Cuomo's an interesting one. Longtime Democrat. He suffered a bruising loss to Mamdani in the June primary. Well, now he's running as an independent, as I just mentioned, but he's kind of struggling to gain ground there. Sliwa, meanwhile, has been encouraged by Cuomo himself to get out of the race because I think Cuomo wants basically to pick up his votes. He sort of sees Sliwa as being the person who stands in the way of his ability to beat Mamdani. The White House even has urged Sliwa to drop out. So a question that I'm curious about is when can people expect to hear some results? So basically, if you're in line, the same story here in Wisconsin, if you're in line before closing time, which would be 9 o'clock Eastern time tonight, the city has to accept your vote. So the moral of the story there is people should stay in line. The results are going to start to come in within minutes of the polls closing, but media outlets aren't expected to call the mayoral race until after 10 p.m. So we may have answers for you tonight on Fox 6 News at 9 and 10. Stay tuned to that. Unlike Wisconsin, you cannot register to vote on Election Day in New York. The last day to register was actually last week on October 25th. So that's notable. I should say as well, or no, excuse me, it was not last week, but the week prior. Right now, 5 million people are registered to vote in New York. You do not need an ID to vote in New York. As long as you provided a valid ID when you registered, you don't need to provide one on Election Day. There's some other city races on the ballot there, comptroller, public advocate. There's also some races for city council seats and DAs. Those will be voted on today. There's also 6 proposals on the ballot as well. So polls over the last few weeks have been kind of all over the place, with the latest survey putting Cuomo within 4 points of Mamdani, while another just days prior had Mamdani, trouncing the field by 26 points. It wasn't until Mayor Eric Adams abandoned his long shot bid to hold on to City Hall in September that Cuomo even managed to claw his way to 30% in the polls. So we'll see what happens. Sliwa is pretty much, every pollster seems to agree that he's going to come in third, with his support hovering in the mid-teens. As for who voted early already, well, more than 730,000 New Yorkers have chosen to vote early. So interestingly enough, almost equal parts are voting on Election Day and early in New York City. Okay, so that's about all I've got with that. It should be an interesting one. Now I want to head, okay, yeah, I'm going to pull up this live shot here. So you're taking a live look here. I believe this is at Reagan International Airport in D.C. You're taking a live look here at a United plane that was grounded because of a security threat. I'm going to see what the latest is on that here. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so Fox News is saying, that the all clear was given at Reagan National Airport following an unfounded bomb threat. This was according to Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. However, passengers were removed from the United Airlines plane at DCA. This is what else Sean Duffy had to say. He said earlier today, a United flight from Houston to D.C. received a bomb threat. The flight landed safely at DCA. Passengers were evacuated, and law enforcement conducted a full search of the aircraft. This is what Duffy posted to X. He says the FAA has received the all clear and operations have resumed. I want to thank our brave men and women in law enforcement for their quick response. So that ground stop was temporarily issued at the airport as passengers from the United Airlines flight were then bused to a terminal. The FBI D.C. field office said that its National Capital Response Squad responded to reports of a bomb threat at Reagan. It said no hazards were found, and the FBI continues to work with our law enforcement partners on this investigation. When asked for comment, United Airlines referred Fox News to the FBI. So the FAA simply saying the FAA is aware of a reported security issue on an aircraft at Reagan. Passengers have been removed. Okay, blah, blah, blah. We know all that. According to this, this is kind of interesting. United Airlines Flight 512 landed at Reagan at around 11:30 a.m. and then stopped at an adjacent runway away from the terminal in response to a security threat. Airport runways remain closed until passengers were safely offloaded and bused to the terminal. The runways then reopened at 12:50 p.m., so about 2 hours later. And yeah, now they're investigating this further. It said, though people meeting passengers or flying this afternoon should expect delays and check with their airline for updated flight information. So there could be a ripple down effect from this. Okay, well, those were the two things that I wanted to check in on. I'm going to take another break here, kind of get my bearings, going to try to find some local stuff for you, and I'll see you on the other side of this short break.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Okay, welcome to the Wisconsin Live Desk, everybody. I want to check in now with some breaking news that we were following this morning, all morning long on Wake Up, and that is the death of former Vice President Dick Cheney. He was just 84 years old. His family saying in a statement that he died of complications due to pneumonia and cardiac vascular disease. So I think we have a couple full screens that my fabulous producer Delaney is going to pull up for us. Okay, so this is the statement that the family has given. They said he was a great and a good man who taught his children and grandchildren to love our country, to live lives of courage, honor, love, kindness, and fly fishing. If you know anything about Dick Cheney, you know he loved to fly fish. We are grateful beyond measure for all Dick Cheney did for our country, and we are blessed beyond measure to have loved and been loved by this giant of a man. Oh, that is so nice. Okay. Let's see here. I wanted to find Oh, Delaney, thank you. My producer Delaney just came in my ear and said, I have Bush's statement, and that's the one that I was looking for. Okay, so George W. Bush also releasing this statement. He said, in our long discussions about the qualities a vice president should have, deep experience, mature judgment, character, loyalty, I realized that Dick Cheney was the one I needed. I'm still grateful that he was at my side for the 8 years that followed. So yes, he was vice president for 8 years. He said history will remember, this was another statement, or more, that we don't have on the full screen here. History will remember him as among the finest public servants of his generation, a patriot who brought integrity, high intelligence, and seriousness of purpose to every position he held. Cheney served as Bush's vice president from 2001 to 2009, spanning the 9/11 attacks and helping shape U.S. policy in the war on terror, including the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He also served as a Republican congressman, defense secretary, and White House chief of staff in his decades-long public career. He said, as a young White House aide and chief of staff, a congressman, a secretary of defense, and my vice president, Dick earned the confidence and the high opinion of 5 presidents. The statement continues. I asked him to join my ticket in 2000 after first enlisting him to help me find the best running mate. And our long discussions about the qualities we just had this year, he said that he was the one that he needed. That's how he came to that decision to pick him. That's kind of an interesting story. I don't think I knew that he enlisted him to help him find a vice president, and he didn't need to look any further. The person that he needed was right there in front of him. So yes, Cheney was also elected vice president in 2004 with Bush and flourished as one of Bush's inner circle advisors on defense and foreign policy. Bush said that Cheney's steadiness and judgment proved invaluable once they entered office together. He said that he was a calm and steady presence in the White House amid great national challenges. I counted on him for his honest, forthright counsel, and he never failed to give me his best. He held to his convictions and prioritized the freedom and the security of the American people. For those 2 terms in office and throughout his remarkable career, Dick Cheney's service always reflected credit on the country he loved. Bush said Cheney's love for America was second only to that of former vice of his family. He said, Laura and I have shared our deepest sympathies with Vice President Cheney's wife, Lynn, and their daughters and granddaughters, of whom he was so deeply proud. We are praying for Lynn, Liz, Mary, and Cheney, and the Cheney family as they honor a great man. Oh, that is so nice. Okay, yes, if you take a live look here, I think I can pull this up here on Router 2. You can see that the flags, oh, that's me. That's not what I wanted. I'm so sorry. Let's try this again. Router 2, come on. Oh, there we go. I'm so sorry. As you can see, the flags are being flown at half-staff there outside of the White House, you know, as is required by law. This is, of course, a showing of national support for the vice president. I'm going to look now. There's something that came up during the White House press briefing. Caroline Leavitt was asked if President Trump or anyone in this current administration was involved in his services, and she said that she wasn't aware of that. Let's see here. So I'm just Googling here really quick. Trying to figure out here what the procedure is in terms of, will he lie in state? Where will the funeral services be held? Trying to get that information. Okay. I'm curious. I'm going down this rabbit hole of the internet now. Services. Okay. So according to this Google AI overview, it says that funeral services for a U.S. vice president actually follow traditions similar to those for a former president, involving a period of national mourning, a state funeral with full honors, and burial in a prominent location, although families can opt for private services. The specific services and location are determined by the family and the presidential and vice presidential protocols, with significant historical precedents set by past presidential funerals. Okay. Yeah, everything I'm seeing says that details have not been made available yet. Well, it's still very soon. My understanding is he passed last night. So, okay. Now, let's take another quick break. We're going to catch our bearings, and then you've got me for 10 more minutes. And I think we're going to check in with some Quotes for Kids stuff and maybe a quick check of your weather. I'll see you soon.
Live Desk.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Wisconsin Live Desk. My name is Nicola Junowitz, and we are following a really interesting hearing that's going on right now. It's a Senate committee hearing on education where they are talking about sexual misconduct allegations in Wisconsin public schools. Dr. Jill Underly, that's the state superintendent of education, for DPI, or the Department of Public Instruction. She is going to be answering questions and responding to some of these claims. Basically, there was, to provide some context here, there was an article that got published in the Capital Times that essentially suggested that the DPI was covering up or providing loopholes for allegations of sexual misconduct, basically by allowing investigations against teachers who have been accused of sexual misconduct to give up their licenses to practice or to teach in the state of Wisconsin in return for the investigations against them being stopped, if that makes sense. So I want to listen into this because I think it should get pretty interesting. I should also mention, too, that there was another hearing on this, but Dr. Jill Underly wasn't at it. She was accepting an award at her alma mater. That also ruffled some feathers. So, okay, let's just listen in now to Wisconsin Eye.
There's also another provision in the Administrative Code PI 34 that's specific to driver education teachers. So it doesn't matter if something occurs on or off of school grounds, or it's a different standard if you're teaching driver's education. That's a revocation automatically if you have an OWI. Obviously, there are conversations around restoration of a license if someone can show that they have overcome their addiction or overcome their problems.
Here's on the determination, voluntary turnover of a license that I'm hearing. You mentioned that this is, political theater, political points. It's not for the parents who hear that oftentimes investigations are just closed because here, if you turn in your license, we'll stop and we won't investigate. When is that the best path forward? I mean, how do you know if there's other victims, other activity, other things that could? When is law enforcement called into this
right? So
process?
No, that's a great question, and I know that's one probably people wonder about. And the reason we have that is a voluntary surrender immediately removes the person from the classroom, and it prevents them from being rehired anywhere. But it doesn't preclude law enforcement from continuing their investigation. So law enforcement and charges happen separately from what we do at DPI. And our goal is to always protect students. That is our number one goal. That's the first thing we do. And so when a voluntary surrender comes in, I mean, that is in many ways nice because it takes the person out of the classroom and away from kids right away. But that other stuff continues on. And I just wanted to just say, that this process protects kids and it prevents re-traumatization. And then the law enforcement can continue on their end of things.
When is there a policy on when law enforcement is? I mean, you have 1.5 people doing this. Is that one person, the sole person, who goes, we don't need to call law enforcement here. We can just close your license. When is there a policy for that one person to follow? Like now, law enforcement gets called in. When is that determination made, and by whom?
Chair, I think it might help to take a bunch of steps backward. The department is not a primary investigator. So most of the time we are being notified by law enforcement, by county child welfare, by a district who has subsequently said, hey, we have a teacher who is being investigated by law enforcement, or there's a scenario over here. So
let's talk about that. When
if law enforcement
when do you get brought in? Are you brought in by the districts? Or are you brought in by law enforcement? When does this happen?
We take all
Any of them.
referrals. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it can be any of the above. I mean, we might even be brought in because I was watching the news that night and I saw something. And so then it's like, it's then. And but we can be brought in at any stage. And in general, it's usually when charges are filed or the district makes us aware. And then we put the license under investigation right away. And then we start working on the investigation by getting materials from the different people, law enforcement and school districts. And part of the reason, I mean, we have to be thorough, of course, because this is their property, right? And there's also a case where we may get an allegation because we might get an email from somebody, and we investigate right away whether it's credible. And so we want to make sure that, we are very thorough and we are very professional about it. So it could be any of the above scenarios that you described.
I think, Chairman, the response back to you saw a situation that I particularly called out because it's in your neighborhood where law enforcement, school district, others declined to go after a license holder over time, many different referrals. The department took the extraordinary step of saying, hey, we have kids here that have raised their hand and said, we have been victims of this situation. They were willing to come. We lack subpoena power, but they were willing to be with us, providing statements, providing information. The department went all the way down the line on a revocation action, could not get a voluntary surrender. When we completed our investigation, we turned it over to law enforcement. Law enforcement said, wow, yeah, this is actually a more serious situation. Ended up going after this gentleman for criminal charges, prosecuting him, although albeit extremely delayed, and because of the department's work. And that gentleman is now behind bars, I think, for 10 years. So it's an example of we, as the sort of consumer of this information, rely on our relationships and rely on our local partners, school district, law enforcement, and others, to provide credible information. When it's not there, we still go after these people. And so that the backlog that you're seeking, or like what's happening with this 1.5 staff, what's happening with the 1.5 staff is they're often following up saying, hey, Sheriff's Department, have you completed this? Hey, school district, are you done with this particular investigation? And without subpoena power, we're doing that in a voluntary fashion with them. Sometimes they tell us to pound sand, and we have to wait, and we have to wait and wait and wait. Sometimes we get tired of waiting and actually just move into a voluntary surrender or revocation action. But it would be much better for the system if we weren't always way delayed in the backseat of this entire process, so that we could take swifter action. At this current point, we can't.
I have many more questions, but I don't want to.
Okay, you guys are listening to a Senate committee hearing on education where they are hearing claims or concerns have been made against the Department of Public Instruction, in particular, State Superintendent Jill Underly, that the department is making efforts to essentially cover up allegations of sexual misconduct against teachers in the state of Wisconsin. This is all following a kind of incriminating Cap Times article that was published and led to a lot of outrage from families, parents, and victims and their families. So, okay, I am signing out now for this first hour here of the Wisconsin Live Desk. It is Tuesday, November 4th of 2025 at 1:29 p.m. on the nose. I got Haley Spittler in the house. She's going to pick up your second hour here. I'm going to send us back now to this committee hearing because I do think that it's really interesting. So without further ado, I'll see you next week.
Application in a window of time. Jennifer, do you know the times off the top of your head? I think it's 1 to 6. Isn't there a 1 year window too? Yeah. Go ahead, if you want to give the detailed scenarios of different revocation reapplying.
No, I actually just wanted to expand, though, on what you're bringing up. If someone's revoked, they can't teach. That's true. However, that doesn't prohibit them from necessarily becoming a regular education paraprofessional. We don't license those people.
Or working in a private school.
Sorry, what was that?
Or working in a private school.
As what in a private school?
A teacher, if they have a bachelor's degree.
So they can still teach
in a private school.
With a revoked.
That would be a policy. I think it would be very unwise of a private school to employ someone who's had their license revoked, but they have to have a bachelor's degree to be a teacher in a parental choice program school. And then in a traditional private school setting, we see no credentialing, no background, to my knowledge.
Private schools can choose to require licensure for their educators. We license people at the Department of Public Instruction based on meeting the requirements for the license. And so really at the end of the day, there is no state law saying if you've been revoked, you can't work in a school in some other capacity in a public school setting. And in a private school setting, it's an employment consideration.
So, okay, you guys are following the state law, and so by that standard, then, if a license is revoked and you go through these processes, that person cannot be a teacher in a public school in the state of Wisconsin, but as state law allows it, they can still teach in a private school if that school allows it. That is outside of your purview. We don't have a law that would require a legal, well, I wouldn't say legal, you would have to create a law to create a remedy for that situation, correct?
Right. What you identified is a loophole for private schools. So I apologize when you asked the question and you said schools. My head went to public schools. But that is true. They could still teach in a private school if they were not required to have a license to teach in that school.
Okay.
And they can also work in a school too, if you just want to use the term working. I mean, as anything that doesn't require a license, if they didn't do their background.
Would you consider that a loophole too that could be closed?
Well, if it's crimes against kids and they are, still allowed to work around kids, yes.
Yeah, but you don't have the power to create laws, last time I checked.
Correct.
We do. So that's something that I would hope, would look at up here on the committee to be able to try and close that loophole. So I'm looking for people who are nodding. I've got one person nodding. Anyone else would like to see that loophole closed? Maybe a smile. I'll take maybe an interest. The first part of my question was if you could walk us through what the process is for a revocation from the time a complaint comes to you, and then what that process is, because I think there's an assumption that we all have, and I would like all to have that based in reality.
Yeah, just to walk through the process, that's why Jennifer is here. But I will tell you, it is immediate and swift when we do put the person under investigation. So,
thank you. Yeah, and our Office of Legal Services actually oversees this process. So just so you're aware. But when a complaint comes in, they can come in different ways, right? We can there's anybody in the public can email us. We have that information on our website. Sometimes we get it coming into our online licensing help desk. Those go immediately to our Office of Legal Services, who takes it and looks at it, verifies there's information enough there to follow up, right, and get back to people. They determine if it's credible. And if so, then there's some due process pieces that have to happen, right? You have to notify someone they're going to be placed under investigation. If we know the employer, we have to notify the employer as well. And then from there, the investigation happens. Tom, I don't oversee the Office of Legal Services, so you might have more information on those investigation processes.
So, Senator, as I somewhat alluded to, because we lack subpoena power, we tend to let local investigations mature. So whether that is a local district that's investigating an issue that is in violation of their board policies, or whether that's law enforcement investigating a crime. I think the other thing that you heard in the GOAT committee in the Assembly was that there is some challenge in the law enforcement space around notification. Most of the time, law enforcement prefers that the sanctity of an investigation is kept very tight. They like to be the first people that are questioning witnesses. They don't like to have people be able to formulate strategy for how they're going to respond to critical questions. So we tend to give deference to them in situations where we know that there is a criminal investigation happening. We try not to step on them or step into it and spoil their case. So as that is progressing, our investigators, our 1.5 folks that we've mentioned, will be doing regular and routine follow-ups to say, where are you at in the investigation? What information can we have? That is oftentimes the language that we're using, because in some instances, law enforcement knows they can't share because they're pursuing something. In some instances, they are willing to share the strength of their case, some of the individual facts that will allow us to proceed. But we're generally consuming that information. What we see from districts is that they like to conclude an investigation and then make the determination using 115.31.3 or just immoral conduct in general about referencing what their final investigation findings were. 115.31.3 is in reference to if they terminate someone while they suspect that they had committed immoral conduct, they are required to notify us. If they go all the way down the line and are like, wow, this is a terrible situation, they'll just immediately send us the entire file. They're not waiting for the statutory parameter to be met. So when we get that information, then we have a complete investigation. We're able to make a determination and decision. Throughout that entire period of time, we are generally sending ticklers on the voluntary surrender. So based on the scenario and situation, we usually send one with the due process notice. So when we are saying, hey, you're under investigation, we're sending them a contract of voluntary surrender saying, if this is serious enough, here are the terms that we would want to see. As that case matures, we will also communicate again, reminding the license holders, you want to voluntary surrender and give it up for life based on the circumstances of what we know, you can do that at any point in the investigation. What we tend to see is that as the case gets mature, they are more willing to sign that voluntary surrender for lifetime, especially when they're being investigated for serious crimes. At the onset, we don't get a lot of bite on that voluntary surrender. So they're mostly kind of pushing back and saying, no, thanks, I'm not going to participate in this particular endeavor. I hope that helps.
Senator Quinn.
Thank you for appearing before us here. I have a number of questions, and they just keep adding up as I'm hearing other questions. So back to the chairman's initial question about how much staff you have dedicated to these investigations and whether or not it's enough. And you mentioned you have 1.5 staff that are dedicating their time and full-time. But in the Cap Times article, I think your spokesman is it Bucher? I don't want to pronounce his last name. Bucher. He mentioned that the department has 1 full-time and 1 part-time investigator, which he said isn't enough staff to handle the 113 investigations opened on average each year, and that both employees also have other job duties outside of license investigations. So do you have enough staff to go through all these thoroughly, which your opening comments mentioned, you act swiftly, decisively, and then if they're not even dedicated full-time at 1.5, how many do you think you would need? And I believe the department, you just went through your own reorganization. Did you move more staff towards investigations or not?
No, we didn't move more staff towards investigations. And to be honest, we don't have position authority. So would be great to have more staff. But the thing is, though, the workload, we're constantly having to, as said before, rely on other people to give the information, more, calling and doing follow-ups and things like that. So it would be great to have more staff to be able to do that, just because then we could move a little faster. I can't really say for sure, because like I said, it's a lot of back and forth and follow-up, and we're dependent upon, law enforcement completing their investigations. So resources would help, but I think resources throughout, being able to, resources to help train school employees, for example, on recognizing grooming, and resources for law enforcement even to help. Resources like defining what grooming is would actually make our jobs a little easier too. It would give us some more clarity. But as far as the workload, I don't know how many more people would necessarily help.
Senator, I think the investigators, as we've tried to describe to you, are doing a lot of follow-up and clerical work to chase down cases. What Dr. Underly has invested in is attorneys, who are the ones that are signing and moving through the actual legal decisions. So, it's a tipping point. If you gave us subpoena power or some sort of modified subpoena power, we probably would have to put more people into investigative jobs, because that would keep us a little busier. But as we're sort of consuming the investigations, the more important decision for us was on the legal side, because if we're going to be pushing into some of these areas and working through voluntary settlement, we want to make sure that those terms are well-defined, well-articulated, and we have, under Dr. Underly's administration, bolstered the amount of attorneys that we have.
So I guess, to be clear as mud then, I'm on the Committee on Joint Finance. We have departments that come in all the time asking for position authority, especially in their budget requests. I don't recall seeing a request for any more investigative positions in your budget request. So if we gave you subpoena power, never heard about that until now. How many more positions would you need? I guess I'm trying to dial down. So the public is hearing, like we have this article from the Cap Times, I would say not a Republican bastion of news. So I don't think, we didn't start this, right? It was a bomb on all of us. And how can we let parents know and the public watching today that 1.5 part-time people investigating is enough for the 800,000 plus kiddos we have in this state?
No, I just want to say, first of all, I really appreciate the question. I really do. And I know that school safety and student safety is top of mind. And so I really appreciate that. We could use more people. I just don't know, I don't know the number, but as Deputy McCarthy said, when we've had positions, we've gone into the legal side of things and used the position authority there. We have asked the Joint Finance for, I think it was $6 million to help modernize our licensing system, and that would make it more efficient. And I think that would help the 1.5 people that we have who are ferreting out all this information and these investigations from secondary entities or primary sources or witness statements, probably make their jobs a little more efficient too if we were to modernize our licensing system. And so we'd be happy to look at how many more people we could ask for in our next budget request.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I don't know if you had conversations. I'm just, speaking for me, right? I've had every department head has been in my office as a member of Joint Finance. They've asked for the sky, a lot of them, on a lot of things, and they come in and justify why. This is why, because we're behind on road construction projects, we need more engineers. This is why, right? And so when this comes out, and then the article paints it as 1.5 is not enough, and yes, there's been budget requests for other things, but there's never been one conversation saying, hey, we are not doing enough right now for student safety, and if we don't do more, there's potential loopholes. There's potential non-investigations not going as far as we need because we don't have the funding. If that conversation, I know, ever happened, we definitely get it done. And so that's where I'm trying to figure out, is this all hyperbole or is this real? And then where was the lack of request, frankly, for this?
No, I hear you 100%. And I think that was part of what my issue was with this, because we are doing a good job. Our investigators are, finding these individuals who are, doing these awful things in our schools, and they're getting them removed. We are efficient. We're very professional, and we have removed these individuals from classrooms. And when we revoke their license, they are not teaching again. I think the piece of that it just implied that we weren't doing our job, and that is so far from the truth. We have done an incredible job at the DPI of making sure that we are removing groomers from the classroom. And the other side of it, too, is that when they say alleged, I mean, we may get reports or accusations, but they're not true. I mean, sometimes people are falsely accused, or, there's another reason why. And so not every accusation is going to result in criminal charges or a revocation. And so that headline being the way it was implying that we were hiding stuff from the public, and we're not. Individuals are, listed as soon as we get any report that their license is under investigation. And then at the end of it, it either results in a revocation or, can go back to active if there was no findings. So we are thorough and professional. And anyway, I guess I just would like to reassure the public that that's what we do.
Can you speak briefly in terms of systems? We've mentioned systems updates. You've mentioned requesting more for updates. I think in your press conference just 3 hours ago, you mentioned you're going to be opening an online portal or enhancing, I'm not sure, maybe you can speak to that briefly. The new online database expands DPI's existing public licensing lookup tool, allowing the public to view licenses that have been revoked or surrendered. And I'm guessing that's going to include reasons why, right?
Yeah, eventually it will, because so right now our educator licensing online system, ELO, if you know the person's name, you can look it up. And what this new database does is it basically extracts those for those reasons they were revoked or surrendered, and takes them out of this database that is tens of thousands of educators, as you can imagine. And so this much, much, much smaller subset has their own.
All right, you guys, it is Haley Spittler joining you now here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. I'll be with you until 2:30. Then our very own Ted Perry is taking over for the final hour of the Wisconsin Live Desk this Tuesday afternoon. We have been listening in here on this state Senate committee talking about the sexual misconduct allegations currently kind of facing the Wisconsin public schools. There on your screen is Jill Underly. Of course, she is the Wisconsin State Superintendent of Public Instruction. And this really became a big story a couple of weeks ago. Our very own political reporter, Jason Calvi, covered some of these allegations that really came out of a one-year investigation by the Cap Times, talking about some teachers that were accused of these sexual misconduct and how it was handled in different schools. So today, Jill Underly is at the hearing, and we've been listening in there for just a little bit. But we do have a lot to get to here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. We're monitoring the feeds, really waiting to hear potentially from some senators for the 14th time of this government shutdown today. They did not pass a short-term funding plan, meaning that we are still in the government shutdown. Today is day 35. That ties the all-time record for the longest government shutdown, meaning tomorrow will now set a new record for how long this has been going. And again, today was the 14th time the Senate has taken up a vote in those 35 days. and once again, they did not vote to pass it. So there still is no short-term funding plan, which we've seen already some of the consequences of this. Obviously, SNAP funding is a huge conversation right now. We did find out in a breaking news situation on Friday that 2 different federal judges did rule that the Trump administration must use their contingency funds to continue funding SNAP. However, there's kind of a question if there's enough contingency funds to do that. It's actually the story our very own Jason Calvi is working on today, speaking of Jason, and he'll be joining us here on the Wisconsin Live Desk in just a little bit with the latest on that. Of course, we also continue to follow some breaking news out of the Capitol today, which is the passing of former Vice President Dick Cheney at the age of 84. We're hearing a lot of reaction coming in from those who knew him. So we're going to take a quick break here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. But when we go back, we're really going to kind of jump into some of those stories. And of course, we'll just keep our eyes on the feeds and see what we can bring you here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. We'll also keep our eye, of course, on that hearing that's happening right now at the State Senate, and potentially we'll dip back into that. But for now, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Hey everybody, welcome back into the Wisconsin Live Desk. Time check for you. It is 1:50 this Tuesday afternoon. Again, I'll be with you for about the next 40 minutes, and then Ted Perry will take over. I do want to take us now to a new live shot coming out of D.C. Of course, that is the White House, where you can see the flag is being flown at half-staff, which is in honor of the former Vice President Dick Cheney, who did die earlier this morning at the age of 84. Earlier today on Wild, we did have the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt's briefing to the members of the media. I'm not sure if we got it here on the Wisconsin Live Desk or not, but they were asked if the president was aware of the passing of Dick Cheney. They had a bit of a contentious relationship, and she did say that Trump was aware, but did not offer any necessarily condolences, just saying you can see that the flags have been lowered to half-staff in accordance with statutory law. Of course, former Vice President Dick Cheney was a conservative. We saw him in many different roles as a Republican. However, he did not vote for President Trump in the last election. He instead came out and spoke out saying he was going to vote for Kamala Harris instead, which in part came down to his daughter, Liz Cheney, who is, of course, a representative from Wyoming, who was really put in charge of investigating part of that January 6th Capitol attack. They wanted a bipartisan committee, and she was really the voice of Republicans, and Trump had a lot to say about that. And so Dick Cheney, in the end, said, I will not be voting for President Trump, but instead Kamala Harris. We have not heard any statements from President Trump, but we are getting a lot of reaction to this news of Dick Cheney's passing. I'm going to actually pull up in part this statement from his family, which says, quote, Dick Cheney was a great and good man who taught his children and grandchildren to love our country and to live lives of courage, honor, love, kindness, and fly fishing. We are grateful beyond measure for all Dick Cheney did for our country, and we are blessed beyond measure to have loved and been loved by this noble giant of a man. Dick Cheney was the vice president under George W. Bush when he was president for 8 years. He also was a part of George W. Bush's father, George H. Bush, his presidency, serving then as the Secretary of Defense. But we did today hear from George Bush as well. I'm actually going to pull up his full statement here and read that to you. It says, quote, the death of Richard B. Cheney is a loss to the nation and a sorrow to his friends. Laura and I will remember Dick Cheney for the decent man that he was. History will remember him as among the finest public servants of his generation, a patriot who brought integrity, high intelligence, and seriousness of purpose to every position he held. As a young White House aide and chief of staff, a congressman, a secretary of defense, and my vice president, Dick earned the confidence and high opinion of 5 presidents. I asked him to join my ticket in 2000 after first enlisting him to help me find the best running mate. In our long discussions about the qualities a vice president should have, deep experience, mature judgment, character, loyalty, I realized that Dick Cheney was the one I needed. I'm still grateful that he was at my side for the 8 years that followed. Dick was a calm and steady presence in the White House amid great national challenges. I counted on him for his honest, forthright counsel, and he never failed to give his best. He held to his convictions and prioritized the freedom and security of the American people. For those 2 terms in office and throughout his remarkable career, Dick Cheney's service always reflected credit on the country he loved. Dick's love for America was second only to his family. Laura and I have shared our deepest sympathies with Vice President Cheney's wife, Lynn, and their daughters and grandchildren, of whom he was so deeply proud. We are praying for Lynn, Liz, Mary, and the Cheney family as they honor a great man, end quote. Of course, that was a big breaking news story earlier this morning, and we're continuing to kind of follow the latest coming out of that. I do want to actually get us back to D.C. I just see now here that we are hearing about the government shutdown from some Republican senators. Again, this would come after the 14th time the Senate did not pass a vote to fund the government, meaning it is still closed here on day 35. Let's go ahead and listen in. This would be the Senate Majority Leader speaking.
And is that because there's an issue in the Senate, or there's disagreement between the Republican leadership in the Senate and the Republican leadership in the House?
It's a function of it's Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate. I mean, obviously, you've got to have the votes to execute on whatever it is we put on the floor. And so, you know, we want to make sure that we do that in a way that enables us to have success. And if we have to change the date, which we will, here in the Senate to send something back to the House, we obviously want something that will pass the House and to be signed into law by the President.
Leader, given all the suffering in the country right now, and given the fact that you've held these press conferences every week and the Speaker has held them daily, why is it, do you think, that public opinion is not carrying the day on this issue?
You know, I don't know, and honestly, I've said this before, I really try to avoid making this an issue out of what the polls say or who's winning or losing, because nobody wins. Shutdowns are stupid. I've been here long enough to have been through a few of them. Nobody wins. And so, you know, I think obviously the American people ought to hold us all accountable. But clearly, in this case, it is the Democrats, and they are actually coming out and owning it in their public statements, suggesting that we want to keep the shutdown going, or it gets better every day for us. or we need this for leverage. Those are all statements being made by Democrat senators and House members. And I think that's the prism through which they're viewing this. And I think that's just the wrong way to look at this. The right way to look at this is, as you pointed out, the impact that it's having on the American people and the pain that it's inflicting on literally millions of Americans. That's what I think this is about. And honestly, nobody wins. Let's just, they need to vote. Let's open up the government and get back to work. One last question.
Tucker Carlson had a pretty friendly interview with Nick Fuentes, a avowed Hitler, Stalin apologist. You know, this is a pattern of behavior for Carlson, who's expressed pretty sympathetic views toward controversial figures like Vladimir Putin, for example. Do you believe that Tucker Carlson's views and that his voice belong in the conservative movement?
Well, there are lots of voices obviously out there, and but I don't think there ought to be any. There just should be no room at all whatsoever for anti-Semitism or other forms of discrimination, and that's certainly not what our party is about. Our party is a party that welcomes all comers, and we want to stand up for and on behalf of the American people who work hard every day to make a living, and just want a government that works for them, hopefully at the lowest possible cost, and in a way that enables them to go about their lives and provide for them and their families. Thanks.
Double box there, you guys. We were just listening in as some Republican senators did speak on the government shutdown. We're going to keep our eye on that feed because usually after the Republicans, some Democrat senators will come and give their comments as well. And we really like to provide both sides here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. So if and when anyone new steps up to that podium, we will bring that to you here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. But again, today ties the record for the longest government shutdown. We are on day 35. The Senate did not reach an agreement today. They did not pass the short-term funding plan. Instead, they once again failed to pass it on the 14th vote. So this should, by all means, and the way things are looking today, now mean that it will be the longest government shutdown in our country's history, starting tomorrow. Again, our very own Jason Calvi is going to have the latest on SNAP funding and what that means for you coming up in just a little bit here on the Wisconsin Live Desk, so make sure and stay with us for that. In the meantime, I want to talk about the FOX6 Coats for Kids drive because we're now in day 2, and this is just such an important mission, really, to make sure that every kid here in the Milwaukee area has a warm winter coat when they are going to school. We live in Wisconsin, and our winters are brutal, and the last thing that our kids should be worried about is whether or not they're going to be warm enough as they, wait for the bus or as they play outside, or maybe they can't go and play outside because they don't have that winter coat that they need. All of these things are why we want to have every kid that needs a coat have a coat, and that's just why we have our FOX6 Coats for Kids drive, actually in year 41 now. So right now we are collecting coats. They can be new or gently loved. We are also collecting hats, scarves, and mittens. Those do need to be new, and you can donate them to all of the Milwaukee area location of Steinhoffels. I believe there's 5 of those, or to any of the Landmark credit unions. There are 35 of those, as well as you can go to any Salvation Army church or distribution center and drop off your coats as well. Just make sure and not drop them off at a Salvation Army store because then they're going to go to the store and not to our coat drive. If you're like me and maybe you don't have extra coats lying around, I live in an apartment where I don't have extra storage, you can still participate by scanning that code right there to make a monetary donation. We have a great partner in Operation Warm, which for every $25, they're able to get a brand new coat for a child. The coat's usually worth $61, so it's a great deal, meaning if you donate $100, that's going to buy 4 coats for kids in need. And they make sure these coats are on trend between different patterns and colors. There's something that a kid would want to wear to school. And there really does studies, they do show that when a child goes to school in a new coat, that it has a level of confidence for them, but also they can focus better on their classes because they're not focusing on how cold they are. It takes one less worry off of them. So Really exciting that we are back for year 41 here with the FOX 6 Coats for Kids. So again, if you want to scan that code to make a monetary donation, go ahead. If you don't have your phone out right now, or maybe your phone's just busy watching the Wisconsin Live Desk, you can always go to fox6now.com. They have all the information there, from drop-off locations to what we'll accept to the link to donate your money there as well. And I know you might be thinking, really, they're doing it again? Like, didn't they get enough coats last year? Keep in mind, kids grow so fast. So if a coat worked for a 3rd grade boy last year, odds are it doesn't fit them anymore here as they enter 4th grade. Children really, they move up quickly when it comes to sizes. So the need is really always going to be here in our community. So please help us out. The last time I checked, I think we had raised more than $2,000 already, which is so many coats. It's just such a good way to spend our money, is to help those in need. And keep in mind that all your donations will stay right here in our community, locally, helping the kids right here in the Milwaukee area. So that will run through December 7th. And I think coming up in the next few weeks of Wisconsin Live Desk, we're going to get to chat with, those at the Salvation Army and Rich with Operation Warm, who can really speak to the mission and what they're doing and the need. I was speaking with the Salvation Army yesterday. They've already given out 1,000 coats this winter alone, and we're on November 4th. So the need is absolutely there, especially as we talk, government shutdown and inflation. Budgets are tight. People right now are not able to spend necessarily how they would want to. And when it comes to winter coats in Wisconsin, that's not a want, that is a need. So just again, please, if you are able to donate, again, it can be a brand new coat, it can be a gently loved coat, but as far as the winter accessories, those hats, those gloves, those scarves, those do need to be new to be donated. And there is the monetary option as well if you don't have anything extra lying around. Okay, we're going to take a quick break here on the Wisconsin Live. Oh, actually, I think maybe we'll go back to D.C. I don't want to miss this. We do have some Democrat senators who are now speaking on the government shutdown. So let's listen into here instead and see what they have to say.
And back home in California, these are not normal times. We deserve better than this. Now, over the past 2 months, I've received an outpouring of encouragement and offers of support for the idea of me running for governor of the state of California. I've heard from colleagues in public service. I've heard from business leaders and labor leaders. I've heard from civic and community leaders from throughout the state of California. I've heard from people who have approached me at the grocery store, at church, at local parks. And I've been truly honored and humbled by their encouragement. And I've taken it to heart, along with a couple of other messages that I've heard consistently throughout the year. The first that I've heard repeatedly since January. Countless Californians have urged me to do everything I could to protect California and the American dream from a vindictive president who seems hell-bent on raising costs for working families, rolling back environmental protections, cutting access to health care, jeopardizing reproductive rights, and more, undermining voting rights and civil rights. The other big message I've heard consistently started back in June, when I had the audacity to try to ask a question at a now infamous press conference led by the Secretary of Homeland Security. Y'all recall that event. As alarming as that experience was, not just for me and our family, but for most people who have seen the video, countless people have told me, I'm glad you're fighting for us. I'm glad you're there. And so it is with a full heart and even more commitment than ever that I am choosing to not run for a governor of California next year. I choose not just to stay in the Senate, I choose to stay in this fight because the Constitution is worth fighting for. Our fundamental rights are worth fighting for. Our core values are worth fighting for. The American dream is worth fighting for. And so with love and support of my wife Angela and our entire family and so many Californians, I will continue to do just that. And I just want to take a moment to not just thank my family and close friends, but my entire staff, all my supporters, and the voters of California who sent me here to do this job. I will continue to thank them and honor their support by continuing to work together for a better future. Thank you.
Was this an effort to clear the field for Vice President Harris in any way? Was that part of this
I'm not going to take any
calculus at all?
questions. I'll thank you all for listening.
So you came up here and talked to us that you should at least take some questions, please, Senator.
All right, we were just listening in there as Senator Padilla out of California announced that he will not be running for governor of California. He is a Democrat senator saying that the fight and what we're doing in Congress right now is so important, and that's why I want to stay in the Senate and not take on a new role as governor of California. Again, trying to get you both sides here on the Wisconsin Live Desk on day 35 of the government shutdown after the Senate, for the 14th time, did not pass a vote for some short-term funding. Again, here locally, of course, this does impact Wisconsinites, and we saw last week, especially those on SNAP, really worried about running out of funding. Originally, we thought November 1st that program would no longer have any sort of funding, and then federal judges did rule that the Trump administration needed to use contingency funds to continue funding SNAP in the meantime. But the question is there enough contingency funds? And again, our very own Jason Calvi has been working on that story today, so he's going to join us out of the newsroom coming up here on the Wisconsin Live Desk right after this break. So just make sure and stay with us for 2 minutes. We'll be right back.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Wisconsin Live Desk this Tuesday afternoon. Time check for you. It is 2:10, which means I've got about 20 more minutes with you here on the Wisconsin Live Desk, and then Ted Perry will take over and get you to 3:30. Of course, big story today continues to come right out of our nation's capital. Taking a look here at Capitol Hill, where the government shutdown does continue. We are on, as I said, day 35, which does tie the longest record for a government shutdown. And again, a lot of questions implications as far as what this means for everyday people and Wisconsinites here. Again, SNAP was just a huge conversation, especially on Friday, where people were really worried that November 1st was going to mark the end of funding to that program. Our very own Jason Calvi actually joined us on the Wisconsin Live Desk Friday, where we had some breaking news come out that SNAP was going to be funded by some contingency funds. But Jason, the question kind of remains is how long will that last?
Right, so that ruling was on Friday that these two federal judges, almost at the same time, ruling on separate cases, said that the federal government needed to continue funding SNAP. This is the food stamps program. In Wisconsin, it's called Food Share. So in this state, there's about 700,000 people who receive those benefits, rely upon this money from the federal government to help them buy groceries. So that was the big ruling on Friday, was that the Trump administration needed to use whatever funding that they had, emergency funding, contingency funding, to keep these programs alive. And the Trump administration said, well, that fund doesn't cover everything. So yesterday, the administration said that they were going to be sending out partial payments, about pretty much half of the allotment per person. So instead of sending out the full disbursement of money for SNAP benefits for November, it'll be a half payment. The reason why is because in that fund, for the contingency funding that the federal government was going to tap into, it doesn't cover all the money needed, the billions and billions of dollars. It's short to fund everybody's SNAP benefits for the entire month. So that's why they decided to do a 50% payment. And then as far as when they were going to send that money out, that was still an open question. Then we had a Truth Social post. I'll go ahead and read it here from President Trump today, when he said that the SNAP benefits, quote, will be given only when the radical left Democrats open up the government, which they can easily do, and not before. So again, that goes back to this whole government shutdown that we're in the midst of right now. As you mentioned, it is tied now with 35 days, the longest in history. Once we pass into tomorrow, it will be the longest in history. So right now it's tied for #1 spot. Tomorrow it will become historical, the #1 longest government shutdown in U.S. history starting tomorrow. So President here tweeting out or messaging out on social media this message that the money wouldn't be handed out. The White House then had a press briefing this afternoon, and the press secretary said that indeed he was talking about future months, that there's not enough money in the fund to continue, the emergency fund to continue funding SNAP benefits moving forward. So a lot of confusion when this message went out about what was going to be happening. Were they going to backtrack on what was required, what the judges required them to do, which was send out the money? Caroline Leavitt clarified, the spokeswoman clarified that the president was speaking about future allotment, future money.
I was going to say, because when you joined us on the live desk back on Friday, we talked about how contingency funds, I think, were about $5 billion, but to fund SNAP for a month was $8 billion. So obviously we saw that gap back then. So to clarify, it sounds like for the month of November, they're going to give people who have SNAP 50% of what they have, and then starting after November is where Trump is saying there is no money. Did I understand that correct?
That's what she said today to clarify that social media post. He doesn't want to tap into this fund in the future, which is what she says he meant by this social media post earlier in the day. We're still waiting to hear back from the state of Wisconsin to figure out exactly how these disbursements are going to be handled. I know in some reporting earlier this morning, some states will have a difficult time sending out a partial payment because they have to figure out all of the math, and their computer systems might be a difficult lift for some of the computer systems to do this. So we asked the state of Wisconsin, how long is it going to take for you to send out this money? And we still are waiting for an answer. Right now, I can tell you that the people that are supposed to be receiving their food stamp, the food share benefits in Wisconsin, are really worried about how they're going to pay for their groceries. So there's a lot of community engagement right now, a lot of community members going out and trying to help these people that are receiving food share so they can make ends meet right now, where they're not getting that money. That money's not here, however long it's going to take for the federal government to send it to the state, and then the state to disperse it to those who receive food share here in Wisconsin. We don't know what that timeline is going to be. We've been asking for it, and we're still waiting for it right now.
Yeah, I know. On Friday, you were working on this story before the news broke, and you had talked to people who, do need to go to food banks and who do utilize SNAP in order to get food on the table. I think you mentioned a single mom who works 60 hours who was very worried about this. I imagine right now she's, again, worried. Am I going to be able to put food on the table? I know you're working on this story today. Who are we going to hear from later on in your story here on Fox Local?
Well, we're going to hear some of the political arguments for and against what's going on. We're going to hear from Democrat candidate for governor, David Crowley, who happens to also be the Milwaukee County executive. We're going to hear from him. He's talking about that he believes the Trump administration should send out the full payment. Again, arguing that they need to send out that money. This is necessary money for people's food. We're going to hear from the White House in their argument about the fact that they felt like it was going to be difficult when using that contingency funding. They're going to talk about that. They're going to talk about the next steps, and we're still waiting to hear from the state. One thing that's going to be really interesting in our story tonight, Haley, is we just got a chance to visit MPD District 4, so that's the police district station, and we visited there where all of the police districts are collecting food right now. Also City Hall, the Zeigler building, all of the libraries are collecting food, so there's these big bins outside or in the lobby or the gathering area of these particular public buildings, and people are donating lots and lots of food. So we're actually at District 4 where they had a paddy wagon full or a wagon full of food that they're now bringing over to donate. So people had dropped it off at the station, police officers and people in the community have donated, and now that money is going to be going to food pantries to help those who right now are wondering where their next meal is going to come from.
Yeah, when times get hard like this, I think it's always beautiful to see the way the community steps up to help one another. And I know this is a story where there's still a lot of confusion and a lot of questions. So we appreciate you digging for answers. Jason, for anybody who's watching right now who might be worried about having food on the table, where should they go? What resources are available for them in the meantime?
So there's several different community food banks that are right now providing these resources to people. On Friday, we visited El Bethel Church of God, which is on Good Hope Road, and they were preparing. They said they had this was on Friday. This is before those SNAP benefits ran out. People were already getting ready and worried about the future, knowing that come November 1st that they weren't going to have that SNAP money available for them. So that's one place on the northwest side. They said they had usually on a normal week, they might have 100 visitors coming to get help from the food pantry. And they said as of last Wednesday, that number spiked to 300 people. So you're seeing this, really the food pantries are being stretched thin right now, and they're looking for people to donate. And we're seeing those donations come in. When we visit the library, when you visit the police stations, when you visit City Hall, we were there today. I mean, the food was coming out of the bins. There were so many people donating.
Oh, that is just so beautiful to hear, and I love when the community says, hey, I have enough, I know other people don't, let me donate what I can. So it's nice to see that side of this kind of hard and just difficult situation to walk through. All right, Jason, thanks so much for joining us here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. We know you're working on your story. When can we catch it later on Fox Local?
We'll be on Fox Local at 5 and 6 tonight, and then afterwards we'll post the story as well on the Fox Local app.
We will keep our eyes out for it. Thanks so much, Jason.
Thanks, Haley.
That is the latest coming on the government shutdown as far as funding of SNAP on, again, day 35, which ties the all-time record. Tomorrow will then mean this is the longest government shutdown that we've ever seen in our nation's history. We are going to take another quick break here on the Wisconsin Live Desk because you know who we have not pulled in yet once this show? Our producer, Delaney, and I think it's time for her to join us after the break. We've got question of the day for you coming up, so make sure and stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Wisconsin Live Desk this Tuesday afternoon. Of course, I want to take a quick live look over Milwaukee, where I was just talking to Delaney about how absolutely crazy it is to me that the sun is like setting already. It is 2:21. Gosh, I feel like daylight saving, I'm always kind of grateful for that extra hour of sleep, and then I immediately regret getting that extra hour of sleep because it's pitch black outside at what feels like 4 p.m. Delaney, what are your thoughts on daylight saving?
I agree. I like the extra hour, but having it get dark so early is tough.
So tough. I feel like as a morning newser, like I'm grateful because the sun does rise earlier and it's easy to go to bed because it's pitch black again at 4 p.m. But it's just kind of sad. Like, I was driving home yesterday at 3 and I was like, oh gosh, the sun is like in my... So we've got a couple months of dealing with that.
Yeah, but it's nice for the morning.
It is, you're right. Thanks for always looking on the positive side of things. While I have you, I thought we should do question of the day.
Let's do it.
Okay, so it is National Easy Bake Oven Day. So the question has to be, did you have an Easy Bake Oven growing up?
I did. I got it for Christmas one year.
I love this for you.
Yeah, great gift.
Yeah, what were your thoughts? Did you like the Easy Bake Oven? Were you a fan? Did you cook a lot of things in it?
I did. I used it a lot. I don't think they tasted very good.
No.
But it was fun to use.
I also grew up with an Easy Bake Oven, and I do remember specifically like getting my own for Christmas. I'm one of three girls. I'm one of 6 kids, but I am the baby daughter. I have 2 younger brothers, but because of that, most of my things were like hand-me-downs from my older sisters. So like me getting my own Easy Bake Oven, it was purple. I can remember it. I loved it, and my sisters and I would like make the things. It's just so funny to me because it's a light bulb that is cooking my cookie, and like I could just go into the kitchen and have my mom make like much better cookies in the oven, but no, I wanted my Easy Bake Oven.
No, it was more fun to do, and then it was a little safer because you weren't using the oven as a kid.
I don't know about that. I would like to question the safety of Easy Bake Ovens. Also, like you can't really watch anything cook.
No, you can't watch it cook.
The slot
It's
was
so
like
small.
this big.
Yeah.
And I remember you'd have to like put your like poker in to like get it to come out the other side. Easy Bake Ovens are just a funny idea to me now. You know what I liked better growing up that should make a comeback? Did you ever have a Light Bright?
I did. I forgot about those.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would sit in front of my Light Bright, which if you don't know, it was like you had pegs that were different colors that would go behind the screen that then would illuminate them because the light would put the color on. And you would put like a pattern down. So, or not, if you wanted to be creative, I would just follow the patterns. Like it told me exactly where to put which colored pegs and you could make super cool. That's an excellent toy. I do question the Easy Bake Oven a little bit.
Yeah.
But
it was
okay.
fun at the time.
Yeah, and I think it's still, like, I think people would still want an Easy Bake Oven nowadays if you're young.
If you're young.
Yeah. All right, well, we do have a true or false question that Delaney prepared for us for National Easy Bake Oven Day. The original color of the Easy Bake Oven was pink. Okay. I know for a fact that later on mine was purple. Pink is Pink is an interesting choice if it's the first time you're making it because you are making it clear that you're only really wanting girls to buy it. That's a very girly color. I think they might have gone more neutral. I feel like maybe it was just like white. I'm going to go false, Delaney.
It is false, but they made them turquoise.
Oh.
Right?
An
interesting choice for sure.
You know what? I think that's kind of smart because turquoise is, I think, a girl and a boy color. So if you're, because you know, like when you go down the toy aisle, like it was very clear, like what they were kind of marketing for what. What a good way to be like either one
That's
can
true.
bake their cookies.
Yeah.
Or whatever they would be.
I know.
Also, you had to buy the mix. That was
You
like
had to buy all
easy.
the mix. Yeah.
So that's what's also funny is like for Christmas you would get your Easy Bake Oven and then you could never use it unless your parents like bought the mix for it.
No.
Yeah. Good times, good times.
I do remember that.
Yeah, I remember that too. Delaney, while I have you, I need you to switch the tag board to our really exciting announcement from People.
Oh, yeah.
She's going to work on this really quickly because I want to talk about it on the Wisconsin Live Desk. It's a very big day. If you are a certain individual, People always names their sexiest man alive. This is really important news for Wisconsin Live Desk. Delaney, do you want to do a drum roll for who got it this year?
Sure.
we're waiting for the drum roll.
Well, I have to hold my
Okay.
mic down. You have to do it, I think.
That was fair. It's Jonathan Bailey. Okay. I think they nailed this decision. There are sometimes I very much question who they name the sexiest man alive, but Jonathan Bailey, yes. First of all, good-looking dude. Second of all, he is having a moment. If you are like, I've never seen this man before, he is currently Fiyero in the Wicked movie, obviously the second part, Wicked for Good, coming out later this month. If you've ever heard of the show Bridgerton, he plays a pretty big role there. He's Anthony Bridgerton. Gosh, Delaney, are you a Jonathan Bailey fan?
I am.
Yes.
I really like him.
I
think it was a good choice.
Yeah. I also love him because I don't know him in real life, but from all the interviews, he seems like the nicest person.
He does. He seems like such a great guy.
Yes, which just makes me even happier. Like when we reward the right people.
Right?
We're like, oh, we made the right person famous. That's how I feel about Jonathan Bailey.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Also, Delaney, I saw that people named the biggest green flag fictional character. Do you know who got it?
No.
Who do you think? Who's a fictional character that we love? My close personal friend.
Conrad Fisher.
Conrad Fisher. He was named
that makes sense.
The biggest green flag, which I also agree. He's a pretty big green flag
he
as
is
well.
a green flag.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Good choices all around. Are you going to go see Wicked for Good later on?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've heard people thinking that Ariana Grande has a really good chance at actually winning the Academy Award this year. She was submitted for supporting actress. People really think she might get it.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, which I'd be happy for her because when she was announced cast as Glinda, people were not very nice about it, and then they watched the movie and ate their words because she makes a phenomenal Glinda. So imagine her really getting a last laugh of winning the Academy Award.
Yeah, that would be really good for her.
That'd be pretty good for her.
Yeah.
I think so. All right, hey, it has been so much fun hanging out with all of you guys for the last hour here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. As I mentioned, Ted Perry's taken over for the next hour. He is waiting in the wings, ready to bring you the latest news here on the Wisconsin Live Desk. In the meantime, while we swap in and out here in the Wisconsin Live Desk room, I am going to go ahead and put back on this hearing that we started my hour with. Of course, this is coming out of the state capitol where they were talking about some sexual misconduct allegation in Wisconsin public schools. You can see, of course, Jill Underly, the state superintendent, public instruction, sitting right there. So we'll listen into this, and Ted Perry will be on the other side. Thanks for joining me this last hour.
All of your pictures of what grooming looks like, and Senator Chair, you and I spoke about this a couple of times. You're going to the deep end. You're going to the most the worst example your brain can picture. In reality, we're processing cases that are not there yet, that we have stopped somebody from going to that next level, and we are doing that currently right now. Schools cannot be the only place that that's happening. And I'll give you a small example. I went to a high school to talk about creepy people. Our school resource officer, we kind of knew was a creep when I was a graduating senior. It took 7 more years for him, thanks to this, to make a mistake that was documentable. The gentleman does not own a license. That gentleman was a sworn law enforcement officer in school as a school resource officer interacting with kids. That's a really, really solid example of how this cannot just all fall on the shoulders of our school districts. And to Dr. Underly's point, we do need some help in that. We're here before you, so was law enforcement in the last committee, saying these are some common sense things that we can do to get upstream. I love that analogy.
Very good. Thank you very much again. Appreciate your time. And with that, we'll adjourn the informational hearing. We will resume our normal committee on education on Senate Bill 16, 366, and 424 in 10 minutes. So at 10 minutes, 2:40, we will gavel back in. If you're here to testify on any of those bills, please register out front. There should be, the kiosk should be open to be able to register and get into the system to talk on those bills. Thank you.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ted Perry with you. 2:35 on this Tuesday afternoon, 55 degrees outside. Although you wouldn't know it if you were outside. It seems a little colder than that. Probably the lack of sun has something to do with that. We're going to talk about Stephanie Barrichello, about the weather and about the forecast and what the changes as we already look ahead to the weekend. I know it's just Tuesday, but we like to look ahead to the weekend. Friday night football, so many things going on. But today is an election day. So what I want to do is I want to take you around a little bit. This is a polling place in Virginia. Virginia, one of a number of states with what they call off-year elections. Off-year because it's an odd year. But it's not like these are special elections. These are planned for being off year, and we're going to talk more about that with Professor Mordecai Lee, Professor Emeritus at UWM, political science expert who is often with us on election night and big political days like today. And what they're doing in Virginia is they have an open governor's race there, because in Virginia you serve only one term, only one non-consecutive term. I guess you can go back and run again after you've been out of office for 4 years, but voters there have a choice between the current Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Earl Spears, and the Democrat is Abby Spanberger, who was a member of Congress who decided to run for the governor of Virginia. Virginia is a very interesting state for so many reasons. One, it is kind of a swing state. It can go either way. It currently has a Republican governor in Glenn Youngkin. Before that, it had Terry McAuliffe, and so it does go back and forth quite often between a Republican governor and a Democratic governor. So we will see what happens here for voters in Virginia. And keep in mind something else about Virginia. There are a lot of federal government employees who live in Virginia, especially just outside D.C. in McLean, Virginia. So interesting to see if this is a referendum not just on what people want for the state of Virginia, but also perhaps what they think about the government shutdown. And we're going to take you to other places too. Let me show you, let me take you to New York City, which has an interesting race going on right now, and that is for mayor of New York City. And this could be a historic day because the Democratic nominee is Zohran Mamdani and former Governor Andrew Cuomo, as well as Republican candidate Curtis Swilla, all trying to become the 111th mayor of New York, which, whatever you think of New York, you love it, you hate it, you want to go every week, you don't ever want to go again, there's no arguing that it is a economic and culturally important city in America, perhaps the most important city in America. So we'll see what happens there. Mamdani, should he win, would be the first communist mayor of New York City, one of the youngest mayors in a very long time, the city's first Muslim mayor. So this race has seen a lot of money get spent and a lot of interesting political bedfellows happening. Andrew Cuomo, who was a staunch critic of President Trump, just received his endorsement just the other day. So that's happening there in Virginia. We have politics of our own to talk about. This is Madison here at the state capitol. This is a public hearing which is going to resume in supposedly about a minute. At 2:30 they said they take a 10-minute break. Government's 10 minutes and news is 10 minutes are not always the same 10 minutes. You think they should be, but they're not. And so we're going to wait to see what happened here. Director of Public Instructor Jill Underling is at this meeting, heavily criticized by both Democrats and Republicans for not being at a meeting last week in which she was asked to testify, not compelled to testify, invited to testify on some allegations of sexual misconduct by some educators and what the Department of Public Instruction had been doing to handle it. She was not there because she was at her alma mater, Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, receiving an alumni award, and she has been heavily criticized for not being there. She is there today. So if she continues to testify there, and if she is going to be speaking, we're going to be able to listen in on that. But a big day for politics and government here today as we bring you back into camera one here in the Wild studios of Wisconsin Live Desk. We're going to check in with Stephanie Barrichello. Is that right, Delaney? Around 2:45. So what I want to do is take a quick break here, because once we get going on a lot of things, breaks might be hard to come by. So I'm going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back on Wisconsin Live Desk to give you a busy day of politics. Don't go anywhere.
Live Desk.
Everybody, Ted Perry, 244. You can hear me better now. I believe in being totally candid on Wisconsin Live Desk. I had the wrong mic on before, so if I sounded like I was coming to you from a well, there's a reason for that. I had the wrong mic on. That's no one's fault but my own. But I'm going to bring in someone we love talking to on Wisconsin Live Desk. We are going to bring in, I want you to look very closely at my tie, and then I want you to look very closely at Stephanie Barrichello's ensemble, and it almost looks like we work for the same airline.
Wow.
right? Doesn't it? Like we match a little bit. Plaid to the bone.
Does that work? Am I doing the little movement?
This way, that way. Can we get you something to drink? Speaking of something to drink and precipitation, are we getting some here? It's been a cloudy day.
It has been such a cloudy day. We had a little tease of sunshine a few hours ago, and then this second cloud deck moved in, and that's been, making our temperature struggle a little bit, to say the very least. But we do have a clearing line just out towards the west, so we should end up seeing a little bit of sunshine just before sunset. I guess, better late than never. In fact, you can see it approaching Milwaukee.
I was going to say, is that we can literally see that clearing line behind you, right?
Yes, you can literally see it. So it's coming slow and steady, but we do have more sunshine on the way also for Wednesday and Thursday. If that's, any solace for you, the fact that there is still more on the way. It has kept temperatures down. It's still a mild afternoon, absolutely. We're in the mid-50s right now. Wind is just starting to pick up. It's been much, much lighter than yesterday. Yesterday we had gusts over 40 miles per hour during the afternoon in a handful of communities, so significantly lighter wind today. Unfortunately, tomorrow that strong wind we saw yesterday is back, and it's going to be every other day essentially of strong wind. So Friday is going to be blustery, Sunday is going to be blustery, but it's just the cloud cover. No rain, no precip expected for today. Again, you can see that clearing line even better showing up on satellite, so really approaching Madison as we speak. So all this cloud cover will eventually make its way on out. There's really not a whole lot to go over here the next couple of days. It was quiet yesterday, cloudy but quiet today, and we're going to keep this trend going. Notice for Wednesday, though, as we look at some of these numbers, this is the wind speed and the arrow is the direction. So notice starting tomorrow morning, we're going to be back to some of those wind speeds of 15 to maybe even 25 miles per hour, then with stronger wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour at times. Then Thursday, few more clouds start to roll in, still breezy, but the wind won't be quite as strong. At this point, our next chance for rain looks to be later Thursday night into Friday morning. And at this point, it really doesn't look to be a huge chance for rain, but we could still wake up to a few lingering showers for Friday. I know all eyes are on the weekend, and of course that is warranted because we, for the most part, have our first chance for a little bit of wintry mix, but this time of year is tricky with it still being technically above freezing, and we will likely still see more of that mix. This does not look to be a full snow event, but just to give you a little perspective for you as to why we're not putting numbers out there already. Number one, this is a weekend event, and today is only Tuesday. And here's another example for you. We only really have two long-range models that we look at this far out for weather forecasting and look at how they're pretty much opposite at this point in time. They looked a little closer actually in earlier morning runs, but the European model that we're looking at right now is more so honing in on rain. Earlier it had more of a wintry mix, whereas our GFS model is honing in more on snow and wintry mix. So again, I know on social media you're already seeing a lot of hype on the chance for our first snow of the season heading into the weekend. I really do think it'll be more of that mix, primarily rain Saturday and then maybe Saturday night into Sunday morning. Temperatures are going to drop. In fact, we will likely be around 30 Sunday morning, which would support snow and wintry mix. So that looks to be the best time frame if we end up seeing some at all. Also worth mentioning too, Lake Michigan waters are at record temperatures right now, meaning anybody near Lake Michigan, it will likely be a mix if not full rain. So still a ways out. Snow lovers, you're probably beyond joyful that we're even talking about this in the forecast. Very normal for this time of year to start the conversation of snow returning to the forecast again. This one, a ways away, we'll watch it very closely. But to recap all of this, Ted, still a lot of sunshine in the coming days. Slight chance for showers Friday, but I know all eyes for the most part are on the weekend right now.
Go back to what you're talking about, the temperature of the lake. Is it unseasonably warm or unseasonably cold?
Warm.
Warm.
Yes,
okay.
yes. It's
and
still...
give me Science 101. Warm lake temperature means what?
That just means that even though the air temperatures may support snow immediately near Lake Michigan, especially if we have a breeze, that's going to pull in the warmer air off of the lake. So it will likely impact our precipitation. I know we're talking specifically about the water temperature itself, but that does still translate to some of the air above Lake Michigan. So it will likely still be enough to keep precip again, Milwaukee, and especially right along that lake shore, as more of that mix or maybe even just plain rain. We see it a lot in these, late fall, even early winter storms where it's always lakeside that there's a chance for mix, but inland there's the better chance for snow. It all has to do with just the temperature difference between the water, the air, and what that does to precipitation.
So 2 things on the horizon for this weekend. One, Friday night football. Your
Yes.
advice there, bundle
Yes.
up.
Absolutely.
Okay. And the second is the Veterans Day parade. Veterans Day is next week. The
Yeah.
parade is always the Saturday. I need to point out that it is in Wauwatosa this year, not in downtown Milwaukee. And I'm going to be totally candid. It's not a well-attended event, and it kind of breaks my heart that it's not well-attended. It ought to be. So can we look ahead to Saturday morning? I'm not expecting great temperatures. The forecast I've seen from the FOX6 weather experts has it maybe in the 40s on Saturday morning at 11.
Yes, at 11, likely, maybe low 40s, and that could actually be some of our high temperatures of the day. It may end up being dry, though, so that's some good news. I think the rain chance for Saturday really is trending towards the later afternoon, maybe even evening hours, so that would be beneficial, but it will likely be breezy and it will be cool, so absolutely layer up. And I believe my husband actually sang the national anthem at last year's Veterans Day parade. I don't think he's doing it this year, but I love that it's happening. Sad it's not in Milwaukee, but glad it's happening still, Ted, on Saturday. So just bundle up.
And I can't encourage people enough to get out. People
Yeah.
say it was cold, and I said, you know what? I hear it was cold at the Battle of the Bulge and in Kandahar and other places as well.
Exactly.
It's pretty cold too. So these men and women went through a lot of sacrifice. The least we can do is show up. And if I sound on my soapbox, too bad. I am.
No, you should be.
Your husband has sung at a lot of things, including I was at a Brewers game once, and I looked down and they introduced him.
Yeah.
And I said, that's Stephanie's husband. He's got great pipes. What's the deal?
Thank you. Yeah, he grew up singing. He did theater. In college, he transitioned to more of the a cappella side of music, and I think that's why he loves doing the national anthem. He's done it for a handful of events now. I think more people are learning that he can sing it very well. So I hope he keeps doing it.
Is there ever going to be a duet between you two?
Oh goodness, no.
No, you don't have that?
Oh, I was the athlete.
I was going to say you were the athlete.
He was like the beautiful singer and acting talent there.
Love it.
Complete opposites.
Well, he works somewhere else, and we won't mention where.
Right, exactly.
That's not important because you're our
He who
meteorologist.
does not need to be named.
Yeah, he who should not be named, but has 3 children with Stephanie. All right, very good. I appreciate your time, as
thanks,
always. Thanks very much. And again, that parade kicks off in Wauwatosa Saturday morning at 11 o'clock. Bundle up. I'll be there. I would love to see you there. These men and women and the family members of those who served are there, and by golly, it's the least we can do, is it not? I want to take a quick break. You know what? No, before I take a quick break, let's check in. That meeting is back in Madison, so let's give a listen into that. This is the Department of Public Instruction inquiry into some allegations of improper relationships with students. Let's give a listen.
Is a crucial in supporting this mission, and its effectiveness in serving our schools would be jeopardized by open records laws. As legislators, I urge you to reconsider the WIA's unique nature as a private organization and the potential impact of this bill on the wider education community. Thank you for your time and consideration. I will be happy to answer any questions.
Senator
you might
Quinn
have.
has a couple.
Just one.
Just one.
I think. Thank you both for being here. Carl, I don't think I've seen you since you jumped ship and went south on us. So
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. But good to see you landed somewhere good. I'm totally appreciative of private schools. Not everyone on this committee is, depending on the issues that we talk about. Obviously, you're with a public entity yet. And I get the slippery slope argument of once you open this door, we start on other issues making private schools basically public schools because, God forbid a kid gets a choice scholarship to go. But in terms of records, open records, like walk me through any kind of record relating to athletics that shouldn't be available to the public. I'm trying to think of a scenario. I get maybe over inundated if angry parents are asking all these records and need secretarial time to do it, but name one instance where there could be a record that the public shouldn't have. That's what I'm trying to visualize the opposition to this. I don't understand.
Okay, what if we had an appeal if somebody was appealing a transfer to a different school, and maybe there was could have been an abusive case in there with, family members. I'm just throwing something out there from left field to give you an instance. All right, we don't bring in Susie Johnson and telling her that dad's beating the crap out of her. All right, to the public. All right, that is something private. That's a private record. You don't need to know about that. The public shouldn't know about that. They're coming to appeal on certain situations that come up. That would be one instance. I mean, there's probably a few others that you can look at, but the thing that I would go back to is why. What are we looking for? Why are you so? I mean, I've been here for 2 administrators, and they have. Ms. Hauser has done an exemplary job of leading this organization into the 21st century. And Wisconsin, the WIA is one of the leaders in this nation as an organization for high school athletics, comparing them to any school in the Midwest, the West Coast, the East Coast. People come to look for us for advice on things.
The membership actually creates the rules for the organization, and we agree to them. So we're playing by our own rules.
Okay, thank you. I'll just say as just a comment, in terms of educational questions or problems, I get more calls from constituents on issues with conflict with WIA decisions than any other educational matter in my office, especially when it comes to potential transfers, denial or not. So, I get your private, and when I get these calls and I say there's nothing I can do, like an opportunity to just say, hey, we can't control how you're governed, but they're subject to the same transparency as any other. I get your private organization. Everything you do is on public property. So I get maybe protecting a student's identity if there's a family issue, but other than that, there's got to be a way to build a safeguard into the bill that still allows more openness, I guess.
Yeah, the transfer rules are kind of the ones that are held in question most often. And again, that still goes back to the very same thing. The membership created the rules. The WIA office has to uphold those rules. That's Stephanie and her office's job, and they do an excellent job. If they didn't do it properly, then we would have to question that as well.
Any other questions from committee members? Senator Noss?
Just for clarification, Ledge Council, you mentioned disclosure of someone's father.
Okay, this has been a Senate committee hearing on education involving a lot of things. Right now, talking about the transfer rule and when an athlete can go from one school to another. The WIAA, the governing body of athletics, high school athletics in the state, has been famously, shall we say, cautious is a kind way to say it, about allowing students to transfer. And a lot of their decisions have been met with a lot of head scratching as to why a student wasn't allowed to transfer to a certain school district when perhaps they had a family member that made them a family situation that had them moving to another district or whatever. The WIA, in their defense, is trying to find a way to not have some public school districts be magnets for the best athletes and having people transfer there without a legitimate reason aside from just athletics. So we'll keep an eye on that for you. Always news being made there, right? What we're going to do right now is we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, probably my favorite person to talk to, Dr. Mordecai Lee, is going to be with us to talk about a busy day in national politics. Keep it right here on the Wisconsin Live Desk.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Welcome back, everybody. It is 3:03 on a Tuesday, 53 degrees. Ted Perry with you on the Wisconsin Live Desk. I don't know where y'all watching from. We are international because we are streaming, so many of you are watching from Wisconsin and beyond. So we wish we knew we could quantify where you're watching from. You have to send me a note at ted.perry@fox.com. Let me know, just out of curiosity, where you are watching us from. But right now, I want to bring in, because this is a busy election day, and on election day, we do two things. We vote, and we talk to Professor Mordecai Lee, Professor Emeritus from UWM, who's with us on election day. And Mordecai, good to be with you. This is what they call an off-year election, and that makes me chuckle as if there's really an off year anymore in politics.
You know, that's a great point, Ted, because it might be an off year, let's say, for presidential elections, or it might be an off year here in Wisconsin because we're not going to be voting on governor this year. But government happens all the time, and therefore elected offices happen all the time. And in particular, Virginia and New Jersey wanted to get off the even year cycle. In other words, what we're used to is major elections in even numbered years. But they wanted to get into the odd number year. And I think that's relatively healthy. So now we've had 1 year of President Trump, and the voters caring about national issues as well as their state issues, I think will give us a voice, and we'll be able to sort of top all of the speculation and all the estimates that go on without seeing election results.
And why did they consciously choose to do that? Did they want to stand out? Did they not want turnout influenced by national affairs? Rather, you know, let's go to the polls and have people who really care about New York and Virginia, respectively, vote on those issues solely?
Ted, I'm afraid I didn't do my homework on that one. But as I recall, what they wanted was that all the professional pals, in other words, the politicians who are in this all the time, they wanted to have low turnouts, because low turnouts let bosses, like city bosses, urban machines, to have much more impact than when there's a major general election in an even-numbered year. Virginia was famous for having a Democratic machine that was controlled by counties, sort of the county gang, and they really liked having low turnout elections.
That makes perfect sense, historically, when you look at it like that. Okay, since you brought up Virginia, let's start with Virginia, which very interestingly tends to go opposite of the way the nation went. So, for example, in the last presidential election before this one, Joe Biden is elected, and then the next year, they come and elect Governor Glenn Youngkin. I'm saying his name wrong there, but he's a Republican, and that sort of fits a pattern. 2024, Donald Trump, a Republican, wins the White House, and now the leading candidate is Abby Spanberger, who's a Democratic member of Congress. She's going up against Winsome Earl-Spears, who is the Republican candidate for governor. There has been a traditional pattern there in Virginia. Are they just being contrarian, or is this a reaction to who's in the White House, do you think?
Ted, I think the short answer is that these kinds of patterns are correct until they're not. In other words, so every 4 years or every 2 years, we might be seeing some certain pattern in the past, but that really is not a predictive pattern. It could have been really, in a sense, randomness. Generally speaking, voters for governor are pretty aware of gubernatorial issues. If we want to talk about how do they feel about federal issues, then we'd more likely look at a U.S. Senate race or a U.S. House race, and those won't be until the fall of an even-numbered year. So I think these are particularistic kind of issues, and I'm glad that you started with Virginia, because Virginia is so interesting in terms of American politics, that for years it was Democratic conservative, and then for years it became Republican conservative. And then the impact of the growth of the suburbs that are south of Washington, D.C. started changing the demography of Virginia, and all of a sudden it became competitive. It became a purple state. And I like the examples you gave, because it shows that sometimes Democrats get elected governor in Virginia and sometimes Republicans. So tonight, what we're looking for the results is, could be either one of them.
Virginia's a curious state, too, in that you get one term. one consecutive term, right? You don't get to run for re-election right now. And so we have an open gubernatorial seat every 4 years. We are now on the precipice of reaching a record-setting government shutdown. On Wednesday, it becomes the longest shutdown, and you and I both wouldn't bet a penny that this thing would be finished by tonight because there's no sign, there's no discussion today that we know of. So we will now set a record tomorrow, and on that eve of this is Election Day. How much of a factor is this government shutdown? Because there are so many federal employees in that Virginia area outside D.C. and McLean, Virginia, and areas right around there. What role, if any, do you think the shutdown will play? And is there something in the tea leaves, if it goes one way or another, about blaming Republicans or Democrats for the shutdown?
Well, generally speaking, the people who aren't getting paid are the civilian civil servants. All of those agencies that are shut down, they live in the suburbs just south of Washington, D.C. Presumably, they're going to have a high turnout, partly because they're mostly college graduates, and college graduates have higher turnout. Probably they're very unhappy about the shutdown, and this is the only way that they can express it. But on the other hand, we have to remember about the military installations in Virginia, like Norfolk Navy Yard. That generally is the Army and Navy personnel generally are being paid. And generally, they sort of split Republican. And so we might be seeing some very separate motivations in terms of the high turnouts, who's happy and who's unhappy. You know, at the beginning, you said that maybe this will be an indication of how the public feels about the first year of President Trump's term. I think as a general rule in American politics, the unhappies are more mobilized than the happies. And so that's why tonight might swing Democratic.
I should say that Spanbauer has a 9 percentage point lead right now as we go into the polls today. Okay, so let us move on then to New Jersey, which I always think of as a Democratic state, but not necessarily true. They had Chris Christie as governor. He's a Republican. Currently, they do have a Democratic governor who's not seeking to run for re-election. So you have a Democrat, Congresswoman Mickey Sherrill, who's a former military pilot, and you have Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican. Anything stick out of interest to you on this, aside from the fact that New Jersey is a significant state population-wise?
I think you're right that most people would sort of have a kind of an automatic inclination, oh, New Jersey, it's a Democratic state, it's sort of part of the Northeast. But that really is not accurate. It's become more purple, perhaps slightly more blue than red. But tonight for the two candidates, I think it's a really down to the nose kind of race. I expect a close result, and I expect that either of them can win. You know, the demography of voting has so changed that now what we would say is the working class, the blue collar voters will vote Republican and the white collar voters will vote Democratic. Now, New Jersey indeed is a more urbanized state than a rural state. But if you go to South New Jersey, that's farmland, that's wide open place, that's the old fashioned conservative voters. So I think you're right that it could go either way tonight.
Let us go now to California and Proposition 50, which is also called the Election Rigging Response Act. In a nutshell, what's happening here, this is a response to what they did in Texas. And they redrew their congressional maps to give Republicans in Texas more say in Congress. They sort of cut districts to say, we have a Democrat sitting there now. If we carve it here, it's more of a Republican district. And they think they could have sent a total of maybe 5 more seats from Texas, which is a huge congressional delegation, as is California. So they've come out with this Prop 50, which this is one I would bet on. I would bet this thing wins and handily. But are we going down a slippery slope here where states that can, because they're run by one party or another, are just going to start changing things up until they get the numbers they want? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, Ted, for those of our audience who remember something about European history in sort of the 1800s and 1900s, there was a kind of a tit-for-tat arms race. If Great Britain had a ship that was called a dreadnought, then Germany had to have a dreadnought. And if Great Britain had a certain amount of artillery, Germany had to have it. And so that was just tit for tat in terms of armament and war. What we have in the United States is exactly the same. Republicans do tit, Democrats do tat, and then we probably end up approximately in the same place. Now, I say a pox on both their houses. I wish we could have nonpartisan redistricting in all states so that every district is 50% Democratic, 50% Republican, could go either way, depends on the quality of the candidate and appealing to moderate voters. To me, that would be true democracy. But until we could get to that kind of nonpartisan redistricting, I think this is going to go on and there'll be echoes. Let's say, you're right, let's say it passes in California and they pass a pro-democratic redistricting. Then Indiana is going to try to squeeze in another Republican member. It could be then Maryland might try to squeeze in another Democratic member. This is endless. The logical place we'll end up in is that every state will do redistricting every 2 years instead of once every 10 years. And frankly, that's just terrible government.
A pox on both their houses, that's, I think, the best thing you said there, because it's like, it seems to strike me, if you're in favor of Texas doing this, well, then you better be in favor of California doing it, and vice versa. If you're against it in one state, you ought to be against it in another. It would not be an issue here in Wisconsin because right now we have a Democratic governor and a Republican Assembly and Senate, so I don't see that going anywhere. We see how long it took redistricting to happen here in Wisconsin with a split power in Madison. Okay, let's go to New York City. This is a fascinating race, perhaps the youngest mayor in decades anyway in New York City. Not the youngest, but one of the youngest, going up against Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Willa in a race that has made interesting bedfellows because Andrew Cuomo, the former governor who resigned in disgrace over allegations of sexual misconduct, who has been a strong critic of President Trump, just welcomed President Trump's endorsement in this race. They are doing everything to try to upset Mondami here, who seems to have it in the bag.
You know, I think this is a perfect example of why so many Americans hate politics. Your example was that when Cuomo was governor and Trump was president, they were at each other's throats. And all of a sudden, based on sort of the relativism of politics, the expediency of politics, now they're great buddies. I think for most Americans, they don't like to see these double standards of, well, what I say today doesn't count for what I say tomorrow. That should not be the basis for human relations. And that's why so many Americans don't like politics. When it comes to the results, maybe if Mamdani does win, I think what we have to emphasize is that both political parties, even though they're relatively homogeneous, and which is a change from, say, 50 years ago in American politics, you know, Democrats are pro-choice, Republicans are pro-life, stuff like that. But parties still have silos. For example, in the Republican Party, you've got the old-style Republicans. I guess later we'll talk about Cheney. We've got the Trump Republicans. These are sort of very different kinds of values, but they're under the same tent. They're under the same big tent. And so now when we look at New York City, it seems to me that we have to say the same thing. The Democratic Party has sort of its kind of mainstream Obama, Clinton kind of moderate liberals. But the Democratic Party has always had the farther left candidates, the social democrats. And they're trying to sort of coexist, and they're a little wary of each other, and just as a mirror image of how Republicans feel about the various silos of their party. So I think what we're going to end up with is that the Democratic Party stands for one thing, let's say, there in New York City, but the Democratic Party stands for something totally different, let's say, in Virginia, and that's sort of cognitive dissonance. But to a certain extent, that's because we have a two-party system, and the parties have to be moderately heterogeneous if they want to be national and competitive parties.
And so now you have this kind of, this third party guy, in a way, upsetting the apple cart. And it's like, all right, well, I know you, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, is basically what this comes down to making some interesting politics. Before we get to Dick Cheney, and that'll be the last thing we talk about, Mordecai, do we read anything into this? I know we all love saying, well, this means this. Is this a referendum on the shutdown? Is it a referendum on President Trump's first year? Or is this Virginians and New Jerseyans and Californians deciding what's best for them and we should just leave it at that, or somewhere in between?
I like your comment and your observation, Ted. In particular, I think when we talk about the New York City race, New York City is unique in terms of metropolitan areas, urbanized areas in America. Sure, Los Angeles has heterogeneous populations. Some of the other larger cities have heterogeneous, but it's New York City that's heterogeneous to the max. I saw a statistic recently that, we always used to talk about Jewish voters in New York because New York had a disproportionately large number of Jewish residents. Well, it turns out that now, today, for the election, Jewish voters are approximately the same percentage as Muslim voters in New York City. I don't think we can say that about any other major city in America. And so there's a heterogeneity that will...
With the possible exception of maybe Detroit. Maybe.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I think in terms of Detroit, most of the Muslim population live outside
you're right.
The city of Detroit. But, I stand corrected. Again, I didn't do my homework. So
no, actually, I think you're right. I think more of them live in Dearborn than in the city proper. So you are right.
Right. So tonight, it seems to me, after all the results are in, we should look at the tea leaves a little bit about Virginia, a little bit about New Jersey, and about a much more predictable California. But I suspect that New York City is just outside the pack and is just sort of the exception that proves the rule.
Okay. Interesting on this day, hovering all over this, is the passing of former Vice President Dick Cheney, who passed away last night at the age of 84. And I think this is a really interesting time because we talk about, how fractured we are. How do people look at the passing of Dick Cheney, who was perhaps the most powerful vice president in history and was loathed by the left for being part of the administration that got us into a war over weapons of mass destruction that turns out did not exist, but then later, toward the end of his life, just last year, became a proponent of gay rights and a strong critic of the Trump regime. And so both sides may be a little confused on how to handle this death and what to think of him.
Yeah, it's true that when Joe Biden was running for re-election and Mr. Trump was running to regain the presidency, that Mr. Cheney, in one of his last public political involvements, said he was going to vote for Biden. He didn't think that President Trump should be elected to a second term. And so that probably epitomizes the split in the Republican Party. I guess we'd call them old line conservative Republicans versus the sort of newer Trump-style populist Republicans. Now, in his case, he didn't say he was leaving the Republican Party, but that he was voting for the Democratic president. His daughter, of course, the Congresswoman from Wyoming, holding the seat, the at-large seat that he used to hold, was defeated running for renomination as a Republican Congresswoman because she also agreed with her father and broke with Trump. So I think in the long run, what we want to see is after President Trump finishes his last term, is there a return to that silo of the old style conservatives, or has Trump in a sense conquered the Republican Party and refashioned it wholly? One detail, maybe this is just trivial, but Dick Cheney has strong roots in Wisconsin.
That's right.
After he finished getting his bachelor's degree at University of Wyoming, I think it was, he moved to Madison and enrolled in the Master of Political Science up on Bascom Hill and was working on his master's degree when he became an intern for Governor Knowles, Governor Warren Knowles, famously moderate Republican governor, multi-term governor here in Wisconsin. And there was a kind of a Bascom Hill mafia that included Bill Steiger, included Cheney. Bill Steiger later got elected congressman from sort of the Fond du Lac district. And then Cheney moved to Washington to work for him, and that was sort of his debut in Washington. So from those days, because of Bill Steiger's moderateness and Warren Knowles' moderateness, most people thought that Cheney must be a moderate. And it was only when he got elected to the at-large congressional seat from Wyoming that he really sort of came out as a full-fledged Republican conservative.
Republicans in Madison have traditionally been different than Republicans in Laramie. I mean, there's a difference there, right? In the same thing. Boy, I've never heard that term, Bascom Hill Mafia here. The only thing I ever did on Bascom Hill was wish I had gone to the University of Kansas where it was flat, because they say by the time you graduated Madison and had enough classes on Bascom Hill, it was the equivalent to climbing Mount McKinley like 7 times or something like that. And so,
and especially
in the winter, yeah.
When it was windy and slippery and snowy.
Indeed. Mordecai, thank you for your time. We know this is part of your workday. You've been working on some writings, but I can't have an election day come without talking to Mordecai Lee. It's just like having cookies with no milk, right? So I thank you for your time.
A real pleasure. Thank you, Ted.
All right, Mordecai Lee joining us there. We appreciate his time there. As we go to break real quickly, I'm just going to show you this, and we'll let Mordecai sign off there. This is from the George W. Bush Presidential Center. It is a long tribute. I'm not going to read all of it, but this is from President George W. Bush on his vice president. The death of Richard B. Cheney is a loss to the nation and a sorrow to his friends. Laura, that's a reference to former First Lady Laura Bush, and I will remember Dick Cheney for the decent, honorable man that he was. History will remember him as the finest public servant of his generation. Some thoughts there from the former President of the United States, George W. Bush. I am going to come back here and send it to a quick commercial break. We come back, we'll wrap up things here on Wisconsin Live Desk. It's Tuesday afternoon. I'm Ted Perry, and you're watching Wisconsin Live Desk, and we appreciate you doing so.
This is the Wisconsin Live Desk.
Ted Perry with you on the Wisconsin Live Desk on this Tuesday afternoon. It's an overcast day in southeastern Wisconsin. We got the weather update from Stephanie Barrichello before. Got a few minutes left, and I want to go to People Magazine, once again snubbing me. I don't know why you're laughing in there, Delaney. We're going to bring you in here in a second. Jonathan Bailey has been decided by People Magazine to be once again, or not once again, but the sexiest man alive. And I didn't know who he was. I'd never heard of him. So let's bring in there she is, Delaney Reed, our producer, director extraordinaire. Tell me, who is this guy?
He's known for his roles in Wicked and then Bridgerton.
Didn't see it. Okay, I had to Google him. He's a 37-year-old Brit who's been in Broadchurch, Fellow Travelers, and Wicked, and Bridgerton, even been in Jurassic World. So everything he's done, I haven't seen. I'm not saying he's not a handsome fella. He is. I know you just said 90 seconds, like you don't want to have this conversation. Would you agree with that pick? Would you have had someone else? Do you have any thoughts on it? I mean, you know.
I agree with the pick. I
You
think
do? Okay.
sometimes they're a little questionable,
Mhm.
but I like this pick. He seems like a good guy.
Okay. Again, I know nothing. As I get older and older, pop culture references, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, I used to know everybody in pop culture, but now, again, I've never heard of him. But he seems to, is there somebody that didn't deserve it in your eyes? You said some picks have been questionable. Or you want to name names? Like Paul Rudd won it. Did you think Paul Rudd was deserving, or how did you?
I mean, I could see how he won, but I
Mhm.
didn't really agree with that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever think someone's been totally, like, did someone get snubbed this year? Was there some young
don't think
up-and-comer
so.
of your generation that people should know about? And
No, I don't think so. I think Jonathan Bailey was a good choice.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, kudos to him. I take nothing away. If you had said to me, Jonathan Bailey, I would have thought that was a character in, what's the Jimmy Stewart movie? It's a Wonderful Life. I thought he was one of the Bailey brothers.
Oh, yeah.
from A
That
Wonderful
makes
Life.
sense.
So anyway, missed out on that one. All right, Delaney, thank you very much. Big political day for us here. We are approaching the end. In fact, 10 seconds left. So thanks for being with us on this Tuesday edition of the 2:30 episode of Wisconsin Live Desk. We'll see you on the broadcast side later on. Have a great day, everybody.
Well, all right, we are back. The Packers are back in the loss column, unfortunately. Their winning streak comes to an end today against the Carolina Panthers. They have some major challenges coming up, and they have a key injury to deal with. Here's our starting lineup. It's heads Carolina at Lambeau Field today with the visitors running the show. By the end, the Packers are tuckered out, and Tucker Kraft is out. Bart Lundy makes us say what and why not, because it's tip time in college basketball. Plus, our latest high school hotshot can really save the day.
I mean, that's real tough. I mean, he's definitely a big, part of our offense, a big part of this team. So I mean, just to see him go down, to see anybody go down, but especially Tuck, it definitely hurts us. I mean, we're definitely a better offense when he's out on the field, so it's tough. But I mean, it's also just the next man up, and everybody's got to be ready to go.
Just back from his own knee injury and long rehab, Christian Watson talking about Tucker Kraft. All right, Brandon Cruz is here, Tim Van Vorn, Lily Zhao. Packers lose today. They lose a key player, and that is Tucker Kraft. Lily, I'll start with you. You were in a somber Packers locker room, which was somber for a few reasons. Kraft's injury is certainly at the top of that list.
Yeah, the Packers lose a game, but they lose their star tight end, Tucker Kraft. I think that has a bigger impact in this game for what it means for this team in the future, because you don't know how long he will be out. The severity of that knee injury that he suffered carted off the field. He did look dejected. His teammates in the locker room afterwards singing his praises, and rightfully so. They lose a leader in the locker room and a dynamic, explosive tight end on the field. So his impact felt everywhere in the Packers organization, and his absence will certainly be felt. But you have to feel for Tucker Kraft coming off a phenomenal game on National Tight Ends Day, beat the Steelers, one of his best games in the green and gold. And then this happens today, has to get carted off the field with a knee injury, towel over his neck, and you got to feel for Tucker Kraft. His teammates certainly did so. But again, his impact will be felt throughout the organization, but the absence will leave a big hole in this offense.
Brandon, to move along with Lily's comments there, he's irreplaceable, really, as a football player and as just a guy, an energy generator. The other tight ends on the roster are John Fitzpatrick and Luke Musgrave, neither of whom possess his football abilities or his personality. We talked in our postgame session. Ben Sims was released in a roster situation. Now, he's not there to help out. It's a very short position, and it's much different now without Tucker Kraft.
And it's such an important position to their success offensively. I mean, you look at what Tucker Kraft brings to that offense and makes it so much more dynamic. You lose that. Sure, you get Luke Musgrave, who's able to make catches and all that, but he's not, like you said, the most dynamic player when you compare him to Tucker Kraft. And John Fitzpatrick is not a guy that sees a lot of action anyway. So you don't have that person to be the next man up, so to speak, when it comes to play calling for what Tucker Kraft can bring. So what do they do now? I was wondering if this is a position now where they try to trade this week to bring somebody in, and if there's somebody out there on the market that can make an impact there. That is, if Tucker Kraft is gone for a long period of time, which we expect. But the current guys, they're fine here and there, but they cannot take over for him.
I saw Mercedes Lewis was just signed to somebody's practice squad. I mean, that's the
He was
kind of guy
elevated
out
today
there.
by the Broncos,
That's
yes.
the kind of guy out there
Yeah.
you might say could be a plug-in play. I did speak with Luke Musgrave a little bit in the locker room today. You know, he understands the situation might be a lot different here in the near future. All right, to confirm nothing official on Tucker Kraft, that will probably come tomorrow in terms of an MRI. It's not expected to be good. It wasn't good in the red zone today for the Packers.
It was not. 1 for 5 is not going to get the job done against any team in the NFL, let alone a Panthers team that really held their own against Green Bay and came in with the perfect plan. And the Packers really beat themselves, right? You cannot do this. 2 turnovers. You have 1 in the red zone by Savion Williams, and then you have a Packers offense that drives down the field into the red zone, but 4 negative plays takes them out of it. They have to settle for a field goal, and that cost them 4 points. So again, the team playing very sloppy, not able to take advantage of, again, a Packers defense they should have had success over. So the Packers not really having that killer instinct, but it really hurt them today being so bad in the red zone.
I'm looking at a little list of things coming up here, Brad. We got penalties by the Packers. We have mistakes by the Packers. We don't have a tape of Matt LaFleur decisions. Where would you like to go? Because any of them apply.
Well, why don't we go with the mistakes by the Packers?
All right,
Because this
right.
is something that we see too often with these teams lately. Even when they've had good games or good outcomes, there are still mistakes. And in this case, it was 6 penalties in the first half and then 2 turnovers in the first half. I mean, it just didn't go right for them no matter what they were doing, and it was because they brought themselves backward too many times with penalties at key moments or fumbles on the first drive in the red zone. They just were not playing cohesively. They were not playing like they were focused. And, you know, we were talking about it in our special edition of Fox 6 News after. They were not paying attention to the details. Details matter in this, and these guys just seem to kind of be out there and not really focused like you would expect a team to be.
It's so interesting that you would say that, because Dave Canal, as the Panthers coach, in their post-game locker room celebration said, guys, the details won this game for us. The little things won this game for us. Boy, what does that say? If the Carolina Panthers come in and they're able to handle their business, the Packers are not able to do it on their home field. Would you like to take penalties? Would you like to take Matt LaFleur decisions? What would you like to take? Because, again, they factor in here.
I'll take Matt LaFleur.
Okay.
You know, the play calling. We'll talk about that. Yeah, I know in hindsight's 20/20, right? But that 4th and 8 decision on the 13-yard line to go for it instead of electing to kick a field goal. We're talking about a game that might be going into overtime, but alas, it's a Packers loss by 3. So you talk about that decision. He said in hindsight, yeah, we should not have done that. We should have kicked a field goal. But again, when you're looking at that play, that was coming out of a timeout, and it was a play that was sloppy. It was a play that was not well executed. Jordan Love running for his life was almost and should have been picked off in the end zone. So there are a couple of those questionable play calls from Matt LaFleur in terms of where, you know, he wants this offense to go. But at the end of the day, you're head coach, you're responsible for this team. And, you know, I mean, he will say it every single time. He owns up to it and says it starts with me.
And it starts in these first half issues, which we talked about. Brandon mentioned they've had a lot of first half issues this season. That has not been their best football. Now, you talk about a field goal. Brandon, let's talk about field goals. It was windy. The Panthers won it on a field goal. But Brandon McManus is not as reliable right now as he was last year. You have another kicker on the roster. What is going to take place here?
I wouldn't be surprised if we see these guys really compete for this job this week, because Brandon McManus is not right. He has missed field goals in consecutive games now. He makes that one. We're in a tie game. We might have a whole different situation we'd be talking about of them just eking a win out maybe. Instead, they don't get back to even. They lose 16-13, and you just don't trust him to be able to make everything right now. And it's really strange because you mentioned how great he was last year. All of a sudden this year, once he leaves with an injury, misses a couple games, he's not as reliable as you think. And with what you saw while he was gone, the kicking game was pretty reliable. So I would have to believe that there's a competition this week to see who's on the roster when they play Monday night.
And Lucas Haversick has been kept on the roster. And so that's a little bit telling by the Packers as well as we go forward here. Interesting situation for sure. Before we look at what's ahead, there were some positives today, and Xavier McKinney, who was such a playmaker like McManus last year, steps up in a 3-play span. He gets a sack, forced fumble, and an interception. And we're talking about where are impact players on this roster. Maybe Xavier McKinney shows that today and could be going forward.
Yeah, and again, he's one of the veterans on your team. He's a guy who's a ball hawk. He's a guy that a lot of quarterbacks don't target, and rightfully so. And I'm not really sure what Bryce Young was doing with that pass when he got picked off, but Xavier McKinney right there read it beautifully. So nice, quote-unquote touchdown pass to X there in the end zone. But, yeah, just one of those bright spots defensively for the Packers. They couldn't stop the run, but Xavier McKinney doing what he does best. I asked him at the end of the game, listen, you're a team-first guy. Did it mean anything to have a sack and an interception on the same drive? He said, nope, we didn't win the game, and that's what matters.
Real quick, there was one thing that we haven't talked about a lot there, though, the sack where he forces the fumble. Mm-hmm. If you watch the defenders there, they just kind of stand up and watch the ball go around. Whereas the Panthers pick it up and advance it, and start to threaten at that point. It's interesting to see the Packers kind of quit on the play thinking it was an incomplete pass instead of going for that ball.
Only sack of the day for the Packers, and it's a 6-yard gain for the Panthers. It was that kind of day all the way around. Wouldn't the Packers love to be talking about an ugly win? You talk about eke something out. Sometimes we say, oh, that was an ugly win. They would take an ugly win today. They don't get it. All right, Philadelphia is coming up on Monday Night Football. Then you have 3 games in a 12-day span. If you think this is getting easier for the Packers, is not. But maybe that's good because they seem to play up if they need to play up.
Yeah, and we've seen that. We saw it week 1 with Detroit. We saw it last Sunday night in Pittsburgh in the second half against Aaron Rodgers. We saw it in Dallas offensively. I mean, this team knows how to rise to the occasion, it seems, but they can't do it consistently, and that's what they need to do, especially with what's up in their next 4 games. Consistency is going to be the key for their success.
We've heard that word consistency. We haven't seen consistency, Lily. This team is still winning its division, which suddenly is, like last year, a very successful decision. Is it a legit team, or are there too many cracks here?
There are cracks right now, but that doesn't mean that this Packers team cannot turn it around and be a Super Bowl contender, but they got to find that killer instinct. It has to start on Monday because the rest of their schedule could very well determine if this team is playoff bound against a very good divisional opponents that are all kind of stacked towards the end of the year.
They had that swagger after the first 2 games of the regular season. They kind of had it coming out of Pittsburgh, and this is the performance out of Pittsburgh. Just an odd team to watch so far in this season. We're glad you're watching the Fox 6 Sports Blitz, and we have more coming up right around the corner, including Say What and some hoops.
What is it when you're the lead of the parade? What do they call you?
Isthmus.
Antsiness or whatever the word is.
I never knew that. You learn something new every day.
I brought the Navy SEAL Winter Warriors with us. Tilt the floor, guys. Or a hazmat team. Boris, you could decide. It might be the hazmat team.
Media Day basketball upon us. We already have the Bucks in action. They are now 4-2. Giannis already named the Player of the Month for October. Does it mean anything that they're 4-2, 6 games in as we go into November?
Remember last year's start?
Right.
I mean, this means a whole lot different than that. I think Giannis and the team have exceeded expectations so far, and these are wins you have in the win column. Last year, they were fighting uphill all season long. So on that basis alone, I think it means something.
What do you think about Giannis's attitude and the way he's kind of come out, not just with the points and the rebounds and all that, but the attitude that he exudes?
Yeah, it's fun to watch, right? And again, we can talk about the moment he had where he said, "This is my city." Again, everything in the offseason talking about Giannis is not happy in Milwaukee. Giannis wants to trade. He won't be in Milwaukee. He says, "This is my city." And I know that Bucks fans, the city of Milwaukee, love that moment. But I just love the swagger he's playing with. And it's kind of crazy with how well he is playing. It still feels like they're not really talking about him on a national level because it's just Giannis Antetokounmpo quietly having a phenomenal month. But we're talking about him now on the FOX6 Sports Blitz.
And 6 games in, who's the next guy up? I mean, we used to know it was always Chris Middleton, or it was always, somebody that we would be talking about, Drew Holiday back in the day. Who's number 2 now?
That's a great question. I think it changes on a night-by-night basis. That's probably part of it. Ryan Rollins has had 2 monster games here in the last week, and I think he's obviously proven that he's capable. Would you expect Ryan Rollins to be that number 2 guy on a regular basis? I wouldn't at this stage of his career, but he's shown that he is capable. So we know Gary Trent might be capable. Miles Turner might be capable. I think that's what it is right now, and I think maybe as the season goes along, it will remain that way, not a clear-cut number 2.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, and they are winning that way. And lastly, Miles Turner is going back home tomorrow. What do you think this means to him? He tried to downplay it this week.
I think it means a lot. Again, as a competitor, he wants to go back to a team that I think you felt, probably should have tried harder to keep him in Indiana, a team he spent a decade playing for, a team he went to the NBA Finals with. So, I think he's going to enjoy coming back to Indiana. I'm sure he's going to kind of relish whatever reaction the fans do give him. I'm kind of curious to see if they will do any sort of tribute for Miles Turner, his return back to Indy. But I think he is looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a very raucous game. These games between the Pacers and Bucks have always been kind of, raucous, and there's a lot of tension. So curious to see how it plays out tomorrow.
All right, college basketball tipping off tomorrow.
Yeah.
Marquette, where do you see them going? They start with Albany, but, they don't have that top-notch team at this point, it seems.
Well, so different. They have a lot of players back from last season, but they don't have these NBA level players or guys who've been in the program as heavy contributors for several seasons as we had seen the last few years. So this is going to be much more of a team to watch evolve. Chase Ross has played a lot of minutes. He's a slashing, exciting type player, but has to work on consistency for sure. I think they're a team to watch, but not at the top of the Big East going in.
All right, the Badgers open up as well tomorrow. A lot more hype around them. They're even ranked in the top 25.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see kind of how they replace a lot of production that they lost, but John Blackwell will lead the way. Nolan Winter, Jack Janicki, some guys who are returning that will certainly carry the scoring load for the Badgers, but I think they're going to have a very balanced offense this season.
Horizon League looks like UWM is the team to beat, at least going in. Faison Fields is maybe the biggest name to come back, but Bart Lundy has some players this year.
He does. He likes his roster. They have size. They have a lot of things going for them, and they have some experience in the Horizon League. They are picked as the team to beat in the Horizon League. Bart Lundy's been building this program. It's kind of like, all right, now we're at that spot. Can we crack through?
Yeah, we'll see how it all unfolds. It starts tomorrow officially. What we have coming up is our high school hot shot. Don't want to miss this. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. This season, something special has been building within the Racine Case Eagles football team, and this offensive lineman is a big reason why. That's why he's this week's Fox 6 High School Hotshot.
Hi, my name is Declan Nason. I'm a senior at Case High School, and I'm on the football team. In kindergarten, that's when I first started playing football. You know, it's just a way for me to get closer to my dad. The year before I started high school, we were 0-9 as a team. No one expected anything from us. Sophomore year, we won our first playoff game ever. Last year, we went 9-2 as a program, and then obviously I want to continue to build our legacy. I want to be the best team Case has ever had, and I want the team after me to see the success we had and want to do even better than that. My second sport is wrestling. You know, I started wrestling in 2nd grade. I was not really good at all, but you know, I just kept on putting in that work, and eventually, I think it was my 2nd or 3rd year, finally qualified for state. Then the year after that, placed for the first time. I have some first team all-county medals, some first team SEC. Oh, it's pretty heavy, especially on this side. I'm committed to play football at West Point, and obviously with that comes a lot of honor. It's one of the most prestigious universities, and when I graduate, I'm going to be able to protect and serve this country. God salute. Color guard, forward march. 1st grade, I started Cub Scouts. These are all, you know, merit badges that I've earned. I've earned all my Eagle Scout merit badges. I always thought that, you know, leading the flag and leading the troop were like the 2 most impressive things a person can do. And you have this sense of pride with you, you know, that you're leading all these people. Declan means leader of the clan, so it holds a special place to me, not only because it's my name, but I mean, like, kind of gives insight to who I am as a person. I'm seen as a leader in my Boy Scout troop. I'm seen as a leader in my community. I'm seen as a leader in both my football and wrestling team. I spend a lot of time with my dogs. You know, they're probably my favorite people on the earth, besides my girlfriend. My name is Declan Nason. I'm a senior at Case High School, and I'm a captain of the football team. I'm this week's Fox 6 High School Hotshot.
And as you can see, Declan has a lot of talents outside of the football field as well. Meanwhile, he plans to study to be an orthopedic surgeon with work as a medic when he does enlist. That's amazing. Meanwhile, later this week, our Level 3 playoff edition of the Fox 6 High School Blitz kicks off on Friday night with Brandon Cruz. I'll be at our Fox 6 High School Blitz Game of the Week. It's going to be a heavyweight fight between 2 great teams, a rematch from Week 8, Sussex-Hamilton at Arrowhead. See Friday night. We'll be right back.
It's time for the Packers Passport. J.J. Jansen was all set to be the Packers long snapper in 2008. He got hurt in the last preseason game, so the team signed Brett Good. How long ago does that seem?
Oh, blast from the past.
So they trade J.J. Jansen to the Panthers for a 2011 draft choice in the 7th round. He's played 269 games in Carolina. He still gets a 78 Madden rating, which is one of the best at that position. So J.J. Jansen still going pretty strong. All right, as seen by TVV this week, your questions, your opinions. I kind of know the theme. I've already got a few. I kind of know the theme, but I'd love to hear from you. So hit the QR code there or go to the website and get the link. As seen by TVV, we'll have our latest responses for you coming up tomorrow. That's been interesting. All right, this week, guys, we have the Packers trying to regroup against the Philadelphia Eagles. We have the Bucs. We have college basketball tipping off. Badger football at home against Washington. What's most interesting to you?
Right now, it's the Bucs. I am curious. You know, I was talking to you about who's going to be number 2 to Giannis at this point. I want to see how they do now that they start to get into the season in full, and especially going up against Indiana, who isn't good right now, but want to see how they respond to that response they get with Miles Turner returning.
What are you watching?
I'm going to say the start of college basketball. Nice to have it back and all our teams in action. And again, I think, could this be the year that we have 3 teams in the NCAA tournament? That is what we are hoping, but excited to see everybody tip off and see what they look like.
We will be back next Sunday night at 10:30 with the
I'm back at 2 Live Down from Fox, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Page. Thanks again for joining us. So let's go back out live right now, right outside of Capitol Hill. We have Senate Democrats continuing to speak on SNAP benefits. Let's listen in on Live Now.
To get back to work, and let's open the government so that it's working and that it's working for the American people. I get the pleasure of introducing my friend and another fighter for the voiceless, Representative Maxine Dexter.
All right, thank you for sticking with us on this incredibly important day and discussion. My name is Maxine Dexter. I am a mother, a physician, and very proud to represent Oregon's 3rd Congressional District. And for almost 20 years, I took care of the sickest patients in the hospital. Routinely, Their inability to afford health care, to afford their prescriptions, is why they ended up in the hospital. It's hardworking people who delay or skip medications because they can't afford their basic needs like food and like the cost of health care. And today, Donald Trump is making that impossible choice even crueler. After spending the weekend proudly playing with billionaires at Mar-a-Lago, Trump announced he wouldn't follow the court order to provide 42 million Americans with food assistance. His team may say otherwise, but we know who calls the shots here. No one should have to decide whether to buy groceries or medicine, whether to feed their children or see a doctor. But that's the position Trump is choosing to put 42 million Americans in. Instead of following the law and using SNAP and the contingency fund, a tool he has used in his first term, Trump is choosing cruelty. He's choosing to starve families for political points. In the richest country in the world, hunger is not inevitable. It is a policy choice. Donald Trump is choosing cruelty over compassion. He's choosing billionaires over families. He is choosing to maintain his own political power over helping the people he was elected to serve. House Democrats choose differently. We are choosing compassion. We are choosing to fight for every person who's ever skipped a meal so their kids could eat, for every patient who has ever had to pick between a full pantry or a full prescription. And we are not backing down, because no matter how loud or how lawless this administration becomes, we are louder, because hunger is not a partisan issue, it is a moral one. We are showing up. We will use every single tool at our disposal, legislation, litigation, and public pressure to keep our families fed. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, we'd like to close this out.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Great job, everybody. Yeah, really good. Good job.
All right, House Democrats, wrapping up there on Capitol Hill, talking about SNAP benefits. We want to keep you right now on Capitol Hill. Let's now listen to Senate Democrats continuing to speak on the floor. Let's listen in right now on Live Now.
With stories that matter to you, this is Fox 6 News at 4.
She's found in the woods. No purse, no water bottle, no drug paraphernalia.
Now at 4, closing statements in the trial of Matthew Paul as he's charged with killing his girlfriend and dumping her body in the woods.
A suburban police chief on the wrong side of the law charged with misconduct while on the job.
That is our big story today at 4. Greenfield's police chief is charged with felony misconduct in office.
Jay Johnson's been on leave since the city started an internal investigation this spring. Bill Miston is back on the story with how we got here.
Yeah, these charges stem from accusations that Johnson had a department-owned surveillance camera installed outside of his Racine County home, despite the city attorney advising him against it. In December 2024, Johnson was going through a divorce. Filings say he had department staff install a city-owned camera pointed at his home, despite that city attorney advising that it would not fall under the use for having it put at his home, and it would be for personal use. This past spring, a detective found the camera feed pointed at Johnson's home. Now, court filings say in April, the city gave Johnson an off-ramp, retire, collect his pension, and, quote, write his own story on why he would be retiring. Filings say Johnson became irate, denied the charges, and said he wasn't going anywhere. That's when Johnson was placed on administrative leave. In a statement, Greenfield's mayor called the charge serious, noting the city has resumed its internal investigation. Johnson is entitled to due process and will continue paid administrative leave throughout the city's investigation, as is required by state law. We did go to Johnson's home. We heard someone inside, but no one answered the door. He later emailed Fox 6 telling us to reach out to his attorney. We haven't heard back yet. Johnson's also accused of threatening and harassing other Greenfield cops, including the acting police chief who was put in Johnson's place, Chief Eric Lindstrom. There are a